Roll, please.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Stepson?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Maxbauer?
Here.
Inman?
Here.
Hooper?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Please?
Present.
Chairman Thomas?
Here. Hey, we did good.
We should have flipped. I know. Perfect.
Okay. Here you go, John.
Well, I guess you should ask for
Oh,
a comment, just to be sure.
Okay, anybody else want to speak with public comment?
No, me too. Okay, so thank you for being here, Commissioners. We're going to do this in two basic parts. First, we're going to try to establish some objectives for this year, and remember, you said this will be the time, we'll talk about strategic planning a little bit, but we're really using this time to allow you to develop some specific objectives and strategies that you want to work on this year. And our hope is that at the end of the year, we can kind of do a little report card and see how successful we were in meeting your goals for this year. Okay. Yeah, it's not a problem.
Wasn't over there.
So that'll be the first half. But you also said you wanted to talk about the budget process, and Dean and I are kind of excited about spending some time to talk about that. He's put some information together for you. And so the second half, we'll talk about that. And frankly, I think we might end up having some goals that come out of the second half as well that we'll add to the list. So this is going to be similar to the way we did it with Jim, when Jim Wiesing was helping us with this. Although, remember, today we're going to focus in more on objectives and goals, things that are achievable in a one-year period of time. You know, one thing that I just wanted to say, staff has had a lot of discussion about this, and several commissioners have come to see me about the whole goal issue and goal setting. And one of the things that I guess I'm going to suggest that we really try to work at getting back at is, and I don't have a real good terminology for this, but I'll explain it as a feeling that we had. There was a period of time where I think Dick started it or Sonny started it, where at the end of the year, we would go through our list of accomplishments. And it was always amazing, I think, to everybody, how much collectively the county accomplished in the course of a year, how much positive that we accomplished that really kind of benefited the community, that kind of elevated the quality of life in the community. And that's not to say that still isn't going on, but I think it's important that we inventory those things. And
You're still not getting your mic on that.
Every year so that people understand. So that people understand what it is that we're accomplishing, especially focusing, not so much, it's important that, you know, we fix the things that are wrong and make things better. Just use that. But also that we've done things to kind of elevate the quality of life in the community. So I think that's kind of something I'd like you to think about as we go through this. We think that that's kind of important, and we want to be able to kind of show the value of what we do in the county. And I guess with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and I'm going to let John get started on this. We'll try to get you out of here in maybe 2.5 hours, hopefully. So that thing's at the floor. Perfect.
You just didn't want to listen to me.
Okay, I know most of you are probably familiar with this process now. We've done this a few times. What we're really trying to do today is to focus in on the board's work plan for 2010. That's really what you want to come out of this process. I did provide you with a memo that was trying to give you some indication of what to expect. And so what we want to kind of go through today is to review the 2010 plan, the strategic plan, just to revisit that, make sure that everything, in terms of the goals at least, still makes sense. The other part that I think is important that we look at is on page 14 of the plan, and everybody should have at least a copy of the plan. But there were some work plan items that the board identified last year when it went through its strategic plan process. These were ones specific to the board that were of interest. Now, it would be also important for us to look at those and see if they're still valid. And if you want to include them, or are there ones that perhaps you don't want to include any of them, maybe there's some other ones. But regardless, we just want to kind of look at that and see if those are still of these to the board for 2010. Once we've kind of reviewed the strategic plan, then we'll go through a process of actually identifying the objectives. And I'm going to give you a little guidance on what those objectives mean in terms of their definition. And because I think it's going to be important that we really focus on to what those objectives are so that they can actually be achieved. Once we've gone through identifying those, we're going to validate those in terms of going through and seeing if they all meet the criteria. When we go through it and actually posting up the objectives, we're going to go kind of one by one around the room. And when we actually post them, we'll put them up by the various goals. But then we need to validate them. We need to have a kind of a peer review process whereby we go through and make sure that those truly are objectives and meet the criteria that we've set out for them. And then the next part of that process is going to be actually to prioritize them. And again, you're familiar with that process of using so many of the sticky dots and identifying which ones are priority. Then another part we want to talk about is once we kind of find out what those objectives are, to actually talk a little bit more about implementation. I think that's the part that is often kind of overlooked in terms of we identify these objectives and then we go on to doing our things and we kind of lose sight of these. What we're hoping is that through this process a little bit we'll talk about identifying a commissioner to each one of those objectives just to kind of provide some oversight to the objective to make sure that it's done, to make sure that it's moving forward, or perhaps maybe you might find out that it isn't going to occur this year and maybe it has to be pushed back another year, or maybe find out that it's not really something the board wants to pursue after a certain period of time. But that will kind of help to ensure that these are things that you're focused on and that they will remain in focus throughout the year and not just here today in this session. What I have on the board, or excuse me, on the wall across there are the 7 goals. And just to what we're going to do is not necessarily get into these in terms of changing them, but what we want to do is at least when we put the objectives is to put them in by each one of the goals. And I've kind of abbreviated them here just to make it easier to write down because they are a little bit lengthy in terms of the words. But just to remind you, and I'm hoping that you probably are pretty familiar with these right now, but goal number 1 is a community that preserves the beautiful, safe, and healthy environment, making Grand Traverse County a desirable community in which to live. So really the key terms there is about preserving our environment. Goal 2 is a community where safety is of the utmost concern. So keywords, safe community. Goal 3 talks about a community that focuses on the health and economic well-being of its entire people. Keywords, health and economic well-being. The 4th goal is a county government that collaborates with other units of government on common issues for the benefit of the community and its individuals. Keywords, government collaboration. Goal 5 is a county government that encourages risk-taking and innovation to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our services to better serve our constituents. There's a lot to that. It talks about efficiency and effectiveness of our services, making those services better serving our constituents, but the key word is really talking about risk-taking and innovation. How can we improve ourselves in that way? Goal 6 is a county government where all our customers have ready and easy access to government services. So access to services is key there. They need to be easy, they need to be readily available. And finally, Goal 7, a county government that emphasizes fiscal responsibility and is planning for today and the future. So fiscal responsibility are the key terms out of those goals. So I guess my question for you to start off is, do these still ring true? Do they still relate to what we want to focus on in terms of the county? Any comments?
Yeah, I think we're fine.
Very good. you want to make any changes or tweak any of these in any respect.
I think those are 7 broad categories of this stuff under.
The plan of work on page 14, there's 7 items there that were identified. And again, this was part of your process last year, and they were placed in the plan. And I just wanted to go through these. First of all, read them, and then we'll kind of see if we still want to keep all of these. 1 is evaluate effectiveness of county programs. 2 is support expand jail diversion. 3 is complete viable financial plan for a septic treatment plant. 4 is establish equitable funding for solid waste programs and services. 5 is upgrade 911 equipment. 6 is develop agreement with the tribe for cross-deputization and payment in lieu of taxes. And number 7 is implement Siegel compensation and classification study.
This won't come as a surprise. I would like to remove implement Siegel compensation and classification study.
Okay. I guess what we can do is we can kind of take these off, and if for some reason somebody feels that they should be still part of it, we could go through a process of when we get down to the objectives, if somebody wanted to alter that.
That's what I was going to suggest, is that perhaps, I don't know how practical many of these are, several of these are, and so maybe what we do is when you all start writing on your sheets, things that you want to look at as objectives to put on the boards, if you think any of these are still important, you write them on one of your sheets, and then they'll end up there, and then we'll vote on them.
Well, I guess the comment that I would make in regard to eliminating the implementation is we just last night appointed a committee to establish whether or not it's still a viable study. Well, if that committee comes back 90 days from now or 6 months from now and says the study still is valid, or if it isn't valid, one way or the other, if they come back and say it is, I want that to still be a goal to implement. If they come back and say, no, the study's no good, or it's outdated now, it's beyond where we need to start something over again, then it makes sense to eliminate the implementation. But if they come back, we just appointed them last night. We can't eliminate their goal before we've given them an opportunity to even meet, I don't think.
But I think the other half of that is the budget considerations for 11, so, that weighs into it too, so.
Well, I'm sure that the commissioners are going to have a variety of opinions on that, and that's why I'm suggesting that if someone feels that's still an important thing to be in 2010 work plan, somebody write it on one of the sheets we give you, and it'll go up there, and then when you start voting with the sticky dots, we'll see how important how it falls out in terms of importance. And that'll give us some idea of where it's at. So I just think, some of these things like support expand jail diversion, well, that's important, but that's what we've done. So I don't know that there's more to be done this year to support and expand jail diversion. If there is, I guess we haven't had any discussion about that. So I think we should look at those and go, is that something that really is in our top 10, 15 things we want to accomplish this year? And at a higher level than we're doing. And if it's not, I would think that would be one that might fall off the list. Same with the implementation of Siegel, those kinds of things. So rather than, it's up to you, but rather than just sit here and kind of debate the 7 of them, let's just see if anybody says one of them is important, and we'll put it up there and we'll vote.
I think each of them is going to evolve into some discussion, because obviously we thought they were important a year ago. Maybe we don't think they are now, but each of these is different, and things that, in my mind pop right out, you talk about the expanding jail diversion. Somewhere along the way, we've gotten away from getting a regular report from Community Corrections. I'm not exactly sure why, when, or how, but we don't get that report. I know that program is still out there operating, but since Tim.
No, we get it monthly.
But we don't. He doesn't come in, and one of the things that we talked about with that program was we needed them to be active in trying to find out what other programs were available and tell us what those were, and we haven't heard any of that in a long time.
John hasn't gotten to that part of the discussion yet, but I think one of the things you're going to hear that's important is when we put things up on this board, we're now talking about your objectives. These are your one-year goals. These are things that are accomplishable. So when you talk about jail diversion, for example, you need to be specific about what it is in terms of jail diversion you want to do. Is it to meet with the judges and evaluate, inventory what other programs are out there and then make a decisions of ones to implement? I got one for you. Is it to, we've been talking about this for 5 or 6 years, is it to reestablish the Community Corrections Board and update all those appointments? You know, that's been sitting there, Sonny, since you were chairman. So we're going to ask
Before
you to
that.
be more specific about some of those things because we want to be able to measure whether we were successful or not. And then just one other general thing, and John will get into this more, but I want to say is that it's important to determine in this objective what your role is as a commission. For example, establish equitable funding for the solid waste program. Well, is that really your role? Does the county board establish the funding for the solid waste program? You might argue that, depending on what we do, the Board of Public Works might establish the funding. Depending on how this goes, the local units of government may establish the funding. You see what I mean? So you have to identify, I think, more specifically what your role is, because some of this you may or may not be able to control. So that's just an example for you to be thinking about. We want to be, this is the time, we work to get you to be real general, now we're going to work to get you to be more specific about things. And one of the things we're going to ask you to consider, John is going to get into a little more, when we decide what the 15 or 10 or 15 or 20 things that are most important are going to be up there, we're going to assign a staff member to be responsible for it, and we're going to ask you to assign a commissioner to be the liaison, to have some responsibility to work with the staff member, and then to report back quarterly to the county board. Here's where we're at on it, this is what we're doing. So that we can jointly have some ownership of this and monitor it to make sure it's moving forward. So we're going to be looking for more specific things, right, John?
Yeah, if you want, we can get into that right now.
You know, I've got a problem with the third item and fourth item, financial plan for the septic or solid waste, unless we take it over. As long as we got them middlemen there that can't seem to find a direction to go, I don't know how we can go in there unless we take over the operation.
Can I ask just a point of clarification? First of all, I appreciate what you said about assigning a staff member and even a commissioner. I think that's a good idea. But we're not working at changing this document, correct? This is our 2010-2012 plan.
Yep.
Right.
You're looking at the specific things to implement what your goals and objectives are in this plan.
Even a little bit different, Commissioner, than that. Remember when you got your budget this last year, a large number of the departments put their strategic plans in that budget. And that was their plan for what they were going to do this year to accomplish your overriding goals. Today is for you to do your plan, like they did for their departments, you to do your plan for what the county board wants to accomplish this year. That's what we're talking about. So what is it that you want to accomplish? These overall goals are for everybody, and you set them. But now it's time for the county board to say, what is it we want to do? Now, Dennis may do it, or Dean may do it, or John may do it, but what is it that we're going to take ownership of that no one else has responsibility for as a county agency that we want to accomplish in this year? That's what we're really talking
So,
about.
for example, when you talk about implement single compensation and classification study, a portion of, or a step in that direction is the subcommittee that was developed.
Absolutely. And in fact, what I'm suggesting is, what you may do is you may look at it and say, there's nothing wrong with this. You may say, it's enough for us this year to evaluate the viability of it. Because that may only take 2 months. But if you've got 15 other goals, and when you put them all collectively together, they're a year's worth of work. That might be all you can expect to accomplish on this, especially considering the fact that you can't just implement Siegel. You can develop a strategy, but we got 15 labor contracts and bargaining groups that we have to actually implement it. So if you put up there, implement Siegel, whether you believe in it or not, it's highly unlikely you're going to meet that goal because we got all these contracts to negotiate. So that's why you got to think about what is really our role in that. Evaluating Siegel and making a determination on how it fits into our labor strategy might be a way to do it, so that we develop our strategy for bargaining next year. And that would be probably a good, start for a goal.
Let me give you my viewpoint on your question. And, the county board established a broader process year ago, and we opened it up to the general public, and we had a 2-day session. And at least the board at that time had agreed we would gather their input, and I think during the next process, maybe we gather a departmental input along with administration and county commissioner input in terms of how we address the strategic plan. Strategic plans used to be, a 10-year vision or whatever. Now, as life is changing, technology is changing, issues are changing, strategic plans last, if you're lucky, no more than 5, but probably 3 years. And my vision of the process that we've established is that, we went through that process, we have the strategic plan through 2012, but we need an annual update to say, okay, what things are, like Dennis said, are in this plan that's a priority that we need to accomplish this year, which ones aren't, what things have we identified that aren't in this plan that are facing us now that we have to address and to implement or do something with this year that may not even be in this plan, okay? And so we can work on those things. And then when we get into the process next year, if we're going to follow the same format we're going to make, like Beth suggested, towards the last quarter of the year or whatever, second quarter of the year, we're going to talk about what process are we going to use for the next strategic evaluation next year. And then during that process, I would hope we would review what we have, get public input, and we'd have a whole new, different document a year from now. And I think this process that we're doing today is an interim checkup to say, what have we missed, and what's hitting us, and what do we got to really focus on? And really, when we get down to all these items, which ones can we really do? Can we do 10 major things? Can we do 5? What's the time commitment? Because we're starting this process late, obviously. We're going into March 1, but I've got a bunch of stuff listed on my little cheat sheet that I worked on this afternoon that aren't even in this plan that I think need to get addressed. So, I think the answer to your question is, we need to attack some things that are in the plan and aren't in the plan, and then we'll reevaluate the plan next year. That's my feeling.
Thank you, Mike.
You guys are
They did it on
pancakes.
I guess the comment that I would make, we talk about, where do we start with this process? I think we already did. When I look at the title on page 10, or on page 14, it says 2010 Board of Commissioners Plan of Work. I think the first thing we have to do is evaluate if those are truly the things that we think we can accomplish in 2010.
Exactly.
Because that's what it's titled. This is what we stipulated that we are going to do in 2010. And I think the first thing we have to do is evaluate these 7 items and find out whether they are truly if they are accomplishable for us, and if they're still our primary focus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
As I understand a strategic plan, it is just that. It's a plan. And plans change depending upon certain circumstances. And I believe our circumstances have changed significantly once we got the Consumer Price Index and we realized that our revenues are either going to be flat or could even be decreased. And so I think that warrants taking a look, things like that, warrant taking a look at what our work plan is and either adding or subtracting based upon conditions as they are today and as we envision what conditions are going to be for 2010.
I have a quick question on this 9/11, just for a little clarification. I know they moved up there, they got new booths. Is this equipment issue still pertinent, or is that something we've addressed already?
Well, quite honestly, Commissioner, I'm not sure. I don't know if we were talking about I don't know. Whether we were talking about just the move and the new equipment we purchased. I don't know if we were talking about the central records and 911 upgrade that you just approved for $700,000. But there's a third thing looming on the horizon that some of the commissioners have talked to me about, and that is the fact that we bought equipment, used equipment, some of it, probably now 5-6 years ago. We've not done any plan for replacing the whole 911 radio system. So that's on the horizon too. And then a fourth thing on the horizon, Dean just reminded me, is reevaluating the tower placements and replacing towers. And a fifth thing on the horizon is the grant that we received from Homeland Security to do that Jamel's working on, to do an evaluation of the possible melding of 3 to 4 counties into a joint regional 911 center. So we're working on 4 different fronts or 5 different fronts right there. I don't know specifically which one this is, but I think it's good for you to say, okay, that's a lot of stuff to be working on 911, but we'd like to see 1 or 2 of these finished.
Well, we can acknowledge the things that we have done. We've made the physical change to the facility. We've upgraded the dispatcher area. We've upgraded the record system, or we're in the process of upgrading the record systems. We are actively collaborating with the other surrounding counties trying to talk about a regional dispatch center. You know, we're doing a lot of good things about this. You know, we're never going to get to the point that we never have to look at 911 again. You know, we're just never going to get there. It's just the technology grows so fast, you know, and one of the things they're dealing with now is not only trying to keep compliant with the cell phone changes, but now people want to be able to text their messages, or the computer phone systems that aren't necessarily landlines. So, you know, they're an ongoing issue. We're never going to get to all of those, you know, but I think most of these plans that are in here to be done, you know, obviously I think we all would agree that evaluating the effectiveness of county programs is probably more important today than it's ever been, because if we can't provide good service, we shouldn't be providing service at all, you know, and we're gonna have to evaluate that. The jail diversion, you know, I think that's a thing that's really pretty much beyond our control anyway. You know, we haven't had the judges or the Community Corrections Department in here recently asking us for more money or to expand any existing programs, so obviously they're all happy. Our jail counts are down, which makes me and some other people happy, you know, which is a good thing. You know, the viable fiscal plan for the septic plant, I think Dick's exactly right. We got the Board of Public Works in between there, and we're trying to get together that joint meeting. You know, but that's moving forward, but it's not something we're going to fix in the next couple of weeks.
And I think the G5 has stepped up and they're doing a lot.
Right. The equitable funding for the solid waste program, that whole solid waste program may end up going away as we are accustomed to seeing it, as these local governments enter into separate contracts with haulers to provide solid waste services in their community. You know, I know Bob's going out right now. I've went with him to a few to review the intergovernmental agreement to find out whether the townships are going to renew that, because it's due to expire the end of this year. So far, in none of the meetings that I've been to, has there been much encouragement that they're going to renew the intergovernmental contract. If they don't renew the intergovernmental contract, then the county's participation in solid waste can basically go away, except for the statutory things that we're required to do, which, you know, I've spoken to Dennis about, you know, possibly sitting down with Bob and him and, you know, whoever else wants to participate, and have some discussion about if the intergovernmental agreement goes away and the townships want to handle solid waste in their communities on their own, what role does the county have? You know, and, you know, do we still do the surcharge? If we do we pay for the drop-off sites? Do we get rid of the drop-off sites? You know, and all of that's a lot of discussion, but it's going to happen. The upgraded 911, yeah, like we talked a minute ago, we've upgraded, you know, with the physical plant, if you will. We've upgraded the records-keeping system, but we still have ongoing issues that we're never going to get rid of tonight. Cross-deputization is something we absolutely have no control over whatsoever. We shouldn't even be talking about it because that's solely the responsibility of the sheriff.
Well, I guess I'm going to disagree with you on that
I-
one, because
I
we
don't.
are. This board
Yeah,
put a
we're in the
committee
process of it,
together
yeah.
and said, go meet with
Well-
the sheriff and the tribe, and we're actually in the middle of that.
But it's still solely his responsibility
It's
to
his
make the decision.
But now, see, that's a perfect example, Commissioner, and what we have to, I think the main thing we have to decide here first is, we assumed that what we wanted to try to accomplish today was developing the County Board of Commissioners, your department's work plan, the things you wanted to accomplish this year, okay? In that case, you're absolutely right. The sheriff is the only one who can decide to do that. Your objective this year could be initiate discussions between the sheriff and the tribe about a intergovernmental agreement for law enforcement. That's really our role, you know, so it's probably not worded correctly. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
No, you're fine.
But I just we need to get that decision made. Are you comfortable coming up with objectives for the year? Is that something you want to do? Or is that not what you're looking for today? Do you want to look at the big overall strategic plan? We assumed that since it's a 2-year strategic plan, you wanted to focus in on what you wanted to accomplish. And if you look at those things that are listed there, they're tied right back to each of the goals, and it says board objective. And that's why they reprinted them, why Jim reprinted them on the last page. But frankly, they're not necessarily objectives you can do in 1 year. Maybe they're not real important at some point. Maybe they're going okay and you don't need to put a lot of attention to them. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. The other thing is, the implementation of the Siegel study. We appointed a committee last night to assess whether or not the Siegel study is still valid. I believe we're moving forward with these things, and we just need to reaffirm if they are still our goals to accomplish in 2010. This would be 4 since 6:30 this morning.
Slippery out. We know you don't sleep.
You know, what I might suggest is that we use the process that we've kind of laid out to kind of
Let's
address
get everything
this.
on the
Because I
board.
think you can kind of go back and debate what you have here,
I think it was 3 o'clock.
and you'll never really come to any resolution. I think part of the problem is that, to be honest with you, I don't know if these really qualify as what I would consider
John,
objectives.
I'm sorry, but I
Camp Fire
can't hear you. I'm deaf in one ear, and I'm getting him, and I'm getting you. Could I ask you to repeat yourself?
Yeah, what I was saying is, why don't we use this process as a way of both validating whether you want to use any of these items listed here currently in the plan as your plan of work, along with other ones that you may come up with. Because I think you're not going to come to any resolution by having discussion of these. You really kind of have to use some process to narrow it down. And part of that problem, I think, is some of these are almost goal-like in the way they're defined, and we need to focus more on down to the detail level.
Okay, so are you saying that we should have a sheet up there on what we want to take off of this work plan?
I would say this, if there's anybody here who wants to do any one of these items, to include it when we go down and identify the objectives and we put them under the goal, to put it up there.
Okay.
Yeah, John has a process. I think maybe she could explain it for us.
Well, no, but I mean, that's a good question, because I think we're not going to address these only unless one of your commissioners here puts it up on the board.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask you that it not be written the same way here, because what I'm going to be asking you is to be a little bit more detailed than how these are written here. I mean, for instance, support expand jail diversion to me is really a goal.
Too broad.
And that's what I want to do, is just cover how we're going to identify objectives. And I put some definitions. First, I want to mention what a goal is. A goal is a generalized statement. You got 7 of them here. There's usually not a lot of them. 7's a pretty good number. They're concise, yet they're not specific. They're really talking about where you want to go, what direction you want to go in. After a goal, so you're looking at these 7 goals, you're going to come up with the objectives, and you've done that in the past. But I think what I'm going to help you with a little bit on that is writing better objectives. To do that, we got some criteria here. And one of them is, can it be completed by year end? That's one of the criteria. So is there a budget for it? If there's not a budget for it, do you think you can find resources that could make it happen if it needs resources? Is it measurable? In other words, if you were to achieve that objective, could you determine when it's accomplished what those results are of that objective? And also, it needs to conform to our current strategic plan. In other words, it says it has to meet one of the 7 goals. And if it's longer than 10 months, it may not be a bad idea. We don't want to lose sight of it, so we created a parking lot over there. So what? But
I thought you were going to build a parking garage.
I should have called it a parking deck. Well, hopefully it's not going to be that full. But we'll get to that point. But I guess what we wanted to identify here is what is it that you're going to do to achieve those goals. So while a goal is saying where you want to go, the objective is saying what are you going to do. Now I'm going to ask you a little bit more when you think of an objective is to actually think of action steps to go with that. And action steps are step-by-step means to reach an objective. They're typically programs, events, projects, or whatever, and they're the how. How are you going to make it happen? Now, it's at a minimum, we really need to focus on that criteria in terms of your objectives. The action steps are something, if you have an idea of at least some of the initial steps of how something can get started, I think that would really help this process. So let me use an example. Under fiscal responsibility, there may be an interest to apply for energy efficiency monies that the federal government has through its stimulus program. We've already done that, but that would be, for instance, might go under fiscal responsibility because ultimately it lowers the cost of operating our facilities and so forth. That would be an objective, going after energy efficiency funds, applying for them. The action steps would actually state out how that's going to be done. You know, applying for a grant, the different staff will prepare proposals, whatever those steps may be to make it happen. I don't know if that's the best example, but what we're really trying to do is make sure that what comes out of here is going to be very specific in how it's worded. Because it's important that it actually be measurable, that it can be achieved within the remainder of year, so it's the next 10 months. And if it's not, we can still address it, but it'll probably have to be reserved for another time. And if you have some broad objective that is multi-year, perhaps just focusing on that first part of it. So it could happen for this year. And that's really what we want to focus on, is something that can be achieved within the remainder of the year.
How are we going to go about, I mean, are you giving us a stack of cards, or are we just going to go one by one around the room? How are
Yeah, we're going to go one by, we got some sheets of paper and pens that I'm going to have you go through and give you some time to think of some, and then we're going to go one by one.
You know, we'll do just like we did before. You'll get a stack of paper, you write all the ones you can think of down, and we'll go around the room and everybody gives one. And we'll put
Okay,
them up on
all
the
right.
board, just like we did before.
All right, okay.
All right.
Like you
You
just-
want to help me?
Do you have,
Pens. Yeah. I was going
He
to
just
do
needs one
5 or
cat
7.
license.
I can tear this up into all the pieces I need.
I got 14 of them.
That's what I just said, he only needs one sheet, cat license.
Fiscally
No,
responsible.
you can write on there.
14 pieces of paper.
And now, what do we?
They don't have enough there. Here,
write
here's
down
two more.
everything that you think is
Everything.
1 year
Yeah,
objective, different sheet, one on a sheet.
Do you have a marker with this, or no?
Did I just give you one?
No.
Sorry.
I don't want brown, I want blue.
As many of them as you want.
I thought you would want green.
Oh, yeah, and a mute.
One, I don't know if I get this one here now. Or maybe.
I've got a goal we can't do.
And some of them can be stuff that we're doing already,
What's
right?
that?
Some of them are stuff that we're doing
Yeah, well,
already
like
for
one
this
that we're
year.
doing already is the implementing a new records management system. That's one we're doing already. And like your role in that probably would be,
I gotta think about it.
would have been a year ago.
That's all right.
You know,
That's what most of our role is.
what most of your role is. But it gets harder when you talk about things like financing finding a financial mechanism to make the septic treatment plants solvent. What's your role in that?
It's all a little bit odd, because some of it
I was just
is
about to ask
more
Larry, yeah.
staff than
Oh.
board,
how
you
you-
know.
Some of it is staff,
Exactly.
but like in that
Wants
case,
to
for
do this.
example.
Just
I
write,
would
you know,
think
for
one of the
example,
things
I'm going to
that
write
you need to do as a
complete
board is develop a
dams plan for
board
2000.
position.
What is required by the
Develop a board
regulators
strategy.
and
You've heard me
every
say
note
that
that we.
before.
Yeah.
You know, so there are some things in
mean, you
that
could just
regard.
make it a broad
But see, it's
Oh, so we're
hard for
just
you to
doing
charge
an
yourself
objective
with
right
Yeah,
now.
yes,
solving the
that's all you're doing.
financial,
You're not doing any action plan.
you know,
Whatever we-
the issue
Yeah.
by yourself.
Yeah, whatever you
You don't
want.
have to solve it. It's under the Board of Public Works legally, so you gotta see what your role is in that. Bad for you last night. Yeah. Change that.
In fact, I think at the last meeting they talked about having
Now,
reconvene,
remember, there's more pizza, but
Ross,
you guys bought it.
because you made something.
Deleted.
I would just suggest that you focus on some of those criteria we have, because I think it's, the more concise you are, the more likelihood it's going to happen, because it's going to be very clear to everyone what we're trying to achieve. And that way, you're actually going to have some better results that
And
way.
if you have a question on like making it specific or whatever, John or Dean or I will be glad to kind of help if we can.
Oh, thanks. Wow, that's short. That's good.
Well, I just put the main, I put all the words around it, but he doesn't even agree with the main thing, so.
I don't know.
Are we writing more than one?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
As many as you want.
all right. I have more.
And we're just gonna go around the table until everybody's getting all of theirs. And if you
Oh, all
don't
right.
feel like writing a lot of them, don't worry about it, because Larry Evans's got 14 or 15 of them. They're all in there.
Good.
I do.
We should do this not after a late board meeting. I
Yeah,
couldn't
I
go to
know.
sleep till like 12:30.
Oh, I know.
No, heck, some of us didn't leave here till 11:45, just about.
Remember, we only got a year to finish these, so,
That's right. Please, remember that.
not even a year.
Actually, for today. Actually, here.
Dennis? Nothing showing the trucks are on scene, there's nothing showing they're having everybody else run non-emergency.
Okay, so that means we're okay.
That should be good.
That was the one for Twin Lakes.
Oh.
Twin Lakes.
Fire alarm, Twin Lakes
That's why
Dormitory.
Sonny went out. I was gonna say, just hold on one of those, we may have to add a new objective.
Rebuild Twin Lakes.
Commissioner Inman and I were talking about that before. The other thing is, you look at however many of these we do, and it's what he said earlier, you always gotta realize, there's always
Something's gonna hit
2 or
ya.
3 things that come up that we never expected, like someone gives us back some dams, or things like that, that end up part of the work plan for the year.
important pages. Government can't do much about that. Or knows of it.
No dialogue.
I hate it when I do that right away.
Awkward conversation.
Yeah, thank you. You, or so I've seen it before.
G-U-E.
No, yeah.
Let's see if he does it on the phone.
Like a broken hand.
Couple more minutes.
Just getting warmed up, John.
I'm just getting warmed up.
We're getting warm too, we're starting to sweat. There's a lot of writing going on.
Not too much.
Well, if we don't give you any money, you can't do anything, so there you go.
There you go.
Do we have insurance to cover the collapse of that briefcase that Inman's putting his stuff on?
Pretty full of paper.
I've been busy.
No writing down, little, codes for under your desk for
Shelves?
shelves, yes, shelves.
I've got that down, Dennis.
I figured.
And you know how many times? Count the sheets.
If we keep him writing, we don't have to listen to him.
He's writing,
No,
he's writing away.
he's busy.
I can't believe I did that. I was going to write user friendliness and I was spelling friend and I went I-E-E-I and then I'm thinking, my last.
You were up late last night. felt bad for some of you guys, like being here so late last night, but, a number of you sent me emails at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, so I think you're up anyway.
Wasn't me.
So we might as well be in a meeting, right?
I think I've got emails from them. I think I've got emails from
When do we
four
have
of you at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning.
I don't usually send you emails. I might call you, but I don't send you emails.
You didn't get one from me.
No, not from you, that's true. Very true.
I didn't get a chance to see the hockey game either.
I don't even get a return phone call from messages on your cell phone.
I've usually got it in my pocket.
Do you know how to check your messages?
No.
Beth. He usually brings it in once in a while, and Katie takes a look at it and tells him what messages are on. He will pick it up. She said, I called you, you didn't return my call. Do you check your messages? Usually it's Katie who checks her messages.
A couple weeks ago, I had 3 wrong numbers.
Let's start at your end now. Start here, Sonny.
I have encouraged expanded veterans clinic. I think we really, truly need a veterans hospital in northern Michigan.
But you have to get more specific.
Okay, so that be,
I believe that's health and economic well-being.
okay, so here, encourage expanded veterans clinic, so the board would be supporting that in terms of,
In negotiating with the VA, and we've had multitudes of discussions with the VA. We need to continue keeping that up front with them about bringing services to northern Michigan.
so if I might add to that, it would be about negotiations with the VA.
Actually, I was hoping to get the Veterans Care Clinic up and running this year. That's what, you want specific, and I thought we could do that in a year. They keep talking and talking about it.
Well, I think part of that is involving what their plans are
Right.
in terms of the
Certainly not
VA.
within our control, but we still got to keep it in front of them.
But certainly, I think we can make them known that we want to work with them and that we want to assist them and that we want it sooner than later.
I said identify new funding opportunities by looking at other municipalities' innovations, steal ideas. Under fiscal responsibility.
Can you repeat it? I was writing. John, can you repeat that?
Identify new funding opportunities by looking at other municipalities' innovations. In other words, stealing ideas from others. Learning, stealing.
Learning and
Anything.
stealing.
Good ways. I've refined one of the current ones. Measure the validity of the implementation of Siegel. Consider its implementation, implementing the valid portions consistent with labor strategies and contingent on economic and budget conditions.
Okay.
I have the same thing, and then I just, depending on the conclusions, what do we do if it's not valid? How do you update that compensation and classification if it's not valid? If it is valid, how do you, it's 3 years old, how do you compensate from that? Or how do you, do different portions of it? Like, if they find it's valid, but some of the comparables just weren't appropriate.
Okay.
Me.
The one with the big pile.
Josh, you're going to have to help me on this one.
Take two at a
Yes,
time.
2 at a time for Larry.
I've got complete dams plan for 2010. What is the requirement by regulators and other issues such as fundraising efforts for 2010? I don't know that answer. I don't know based on everything that we have in writing now what we're supposed to accomplish in 2010.
Well,
Okay, so you want to you would like to see us have a work plan for O10?
Yes.
Okay, that's
The one thing I wanted for O10 is resolve the ownership issues for the bottom lines.
that's
That's
another.
what I thought.
I have continued to develop plans for dam removal. So
Okay.
they're all-
All right.
So we got to complete a dams work plan for 2010.
Right. And then the one on the ownership issue, let me say this. It's a goal to resolve the ownership issue in 2010. I don't know that we're going to be able to achieve it in 2010 because it's negotiations or whatever. But certainly, I think that they're developing a strategy and coming up with, a solution to this is definitely appropriate.
So rather than sitting back, I think we need to be proactive on it.
Yep. And actually, I think we now have Lyle Dean scheduled for April 13th to come up and talk to you. And as we talk about the dam removal, I also have the relocation of Cass Road. Yeah, that's part of it too. That's, we still need that other way across the river somewhere, So what we're doing is, you've given that to implementation team, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it back and say, we need a 2010 work plan. So that we can show you where that plan is at and where we're going. Probably save the environment. Preserve the environment. Of course,
It's been under goal two in the past.
The dams?
Dams is preserve environment.
I would think so, preserve
Yeah,
environment.
it's okay.
No, it's right in there in goal number 1.
What do you got there?
Okay,
This
so
is
this
the
one
dams
is,
removal.
this is the Cass
Finalized
Road.
dam disposition.
And I think these are two separate issues.
Strategy.
Okay.
So I kind of think we can go like this, actually. That's okay with you, John?
has to do with the dam. When the dam comes out, all of these factors are part of it.
This
Put it
is a
up there.
separate one. Give me this one here for this. This goes with this. Okay?
Now, wait a minute, we have, I wasn't catching you on the ownership issues one, that's a separate one altogether, is that a
We
long-term?
have to look, no, I think it's definitely, we may not resolve it, but we at least have to develop the strategy for ownership this year.
Okay.
That's definitely valid. You can't let that go. Okay, who's next?
Establish an implementation plan where the county assumes ownership of the septic plant without G5 townships obligated.
Here, John, if you want to put this with it, I have finished structuring and implementation of permanent financing plans, so that goes pretty much hand in hand with Larry's.
Okay.
I'm not as explicit as he is, but it's, the same issue.
You think they are the same issue? They are the same issue, yep.
County
Yeah,
has to own the plant?
You did one already. Well, remember now, these are just individual plans. You guys are going to use your sticky dots to say what level of importance they have. Beth, you ready with one?
I'd say that goes under environment, John.
Good card.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
You want to use the one you want to use.
Let's see. These kind of go hand in hand.
Maybe.
The top one was evaluate effectiveness of county programs from this list, and that, I remember from when we did strategic planning last year, that got huge support at the Civic Center, and it also had, I think, the highest number of dots in ours. So, but to do that, we really need to know how we're going to evaluate the program. So I think, doing it is one thing, but more important is what process are we going to use, or how are we going to scale the effectiveness? A method, yes. But the second part of that is, when we do that, once we determine a program's effective or ineffective, if it's effective, great, it's serving the community, it's valuable. If it's ineffective, do you restructure it or do you ditch it? Is it not valuable to people? So I think almost precursor to that is, how do we assess the community's priorities for programs? So, that we know that this is number one. I don't think we've quite gotten there with this. I mean, I think that this was useful, but I don't think that we've quite gotten there to know that, it'll help us a couple ways, which programs to take our resources out of and put into another one. It'll help us if a program's not effective to know that, hey, listen, we should move those resources. So I actually kind of have two, and I think one's the precursor. And I don't know that we can do these this year, but I think we can determine how we're going to do them.
Beth, I have one very similar to yours, except I'm actually suggesting a start of how. And what I'm suggesting is, first of all, list the programs that we have, identify the number of people that are served and the cost of the program. In other words, we need to determine the unit cost of the program to help us determine what we want to keep and what we might want to change, etc. I think if we do that as a first step, it will also help us communicate with the public and say, you know, this is what, you know, this program costs you, taxpayers. Is this a priority for you? So I think this is kind of along the lines you're saying.
The one thing I want to be careful of is if we start to examine like one program at a time, rather than in totality kind of saying, okay, here's your range of options and how do you prioritize those as a resident? That, I think, will give you a truer indication of the priorities. If we start looking at one program, what you're going to have is everybody who's affected by that one program
Oh, yeah.
lobbying for it. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, but I still think we need to know the unit cost of the program and how
sure.
many people are served, because if we only serve 20 families with a program and it costs us, you know, $20,000, you know, might there be a better way? Maybe that's not worth $20,000. You know, I think we absolutely have to have the unit cost.
Well, I think there's both parts of that, you know, and you're exactly right, but Beth's right also. You know, we went through that recently with the MSU extension, talking about the 0 to 3 program. They're serving 35 families or whatever it was, but the fact is, it was a lot of money. You know, it was what, $65,000 for us to fund it through the rest of the year, and it was like, okay, so $65,000, but we're serving 35 families. Although, you know, those people are at risk, they definitely need services from somewhere, but can we continue to be the place that provides that service? That's got to be the question. And you're exactly right, when we talk about the programs individually, if we talk about them as a public thing of all of the different programs, we're going to get those groups of people in here lobbying for their program. And we're going to get department heads lobbying for their programs.
Sure we are.
But the fact is, what we need to do is an inventory of, you know, and I have in here somewhere, I put down, you know, for example, evaluate programs operated by the Sheriff's Office, DARE, Marine, the school liaison programs. You know, it's always easy to talk about the DARE program, for example, and, you know, but there's no follow-up to the program. Once the kids go to the middle school, it's all gone. You know, but at the same time, how do you make an argument to eliminate a program that deals with kids and drugs? You know, you can't eliminate a program that's telling kids about the danger of drugs. But it costs you a lot of money to operate this program, or, well, I think it does. I don't know. We need to know how much it costs and how many kids do we actually affect. And there's no follow-up program to the DARE program, which has always been my problem, is once the kids truly get to middle school and high school, where they have much more peer pressure than they have in the elementary level, we have no follow-up program.
I think this is further discussion, and when we get to the second half, where we talk about budget, we're going to spend some time talking about this very issue. So I think, and in fact, Commissioner, I think that one there really can go with the other ones that are evaluate programs.
Right, and, well, I also have the same thing for Parks and Recreation, whether they should be talking about the operation of
It's important to discuss
programs.
that with budget too, because I don't think that the commission or staff has the tools to do that the most effectively. I think we're going to have to put resources into it, but I think it would be worthwhile because of the value of the information we'll get out of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Commissioner Thomas, are you ready?
I have
Cat license.
some used ones, support the Veterans Clinic.
We're disappointed that we don't have the cat license.
Cat license.
We're all waiting.
It's not done yet.
We
much second.
implement Siegel if the economy improves. Now,
Oh, wait, you got to slow down a little bit.
One at a time.
One at a time.
yeah, but you already had.
You've already got them up.
We got
Yes,
the
why
red
not?
one?
Yeah.
We do.
I'm sorry.
But I have
And give me the Siegel one too, we got that.
two brand new, never used.
Okay.
One is support the road millage,
That's the plan.
As a commission?
In other words, support the road millage, and I'm going to say that in the past, we've only done 1 or 2 millages. I think we've gone 1 or 2 since I've been here. But what I've heard is, we didn't know where the county board sat on that millage. We didn't hear a lot from the county board, so I think it's legitimate. You know, I mean, I've had the road commission tell me, and Mary tell me, it's real critical that if we go forward, and they approve the language on there, that the county board kind of embraces it and supports it publicly, because you're leaders of the community. So I think it is a real good one. And, you want to do another
And
one?
one more, which you may not want to accept it, but I think we should begin the process, and this would fall under fiscal responsibility, to build a new jail.
Well, what do you want to do?
You're hot on this, we should just start the process. Because we know that sooner or later it's going to fill up again.
You're right.
And no matter how we treat the people that are in there now, it's still going to fill up. The other thing is, this one is so inefficient to operate that we should be making plans at least
I
to
can't
get on
find
the
a
road
location.
for a new,
Can we say develop a process?
whatever, put it
I
any
have
way you
one.
want to.
Okay.
Make long-range planning decisions on jail location, expansion, and/or construction.
Is yours go
Oh,
with
God,
that?
he should have been a book writer.
That clarifies the question.
Well, community safety, huh?
All right, back over here.
Where it'd be.
Oh, I would like to eliminate the solid waste surcharge and drop-offs.
That's big.
Anybody surprised?
That's your biggest one.
Or you could say eliminate the governmental
That's the
agreement.
Sunny plan.
Well, that's up to the townships, because that intergovernmental agreement is not between the county board and anybody. It's between the townships and the Board of Public Works. We're not
Okay.
a part of that.
I'm saying obtain grant money to complete Twin Lakes, and then I'm saying how? Complete 5-year rec plan and get MDNR approval. The DNR has a program where if you complete a 5-year recreation plan, and this is not a master plan, it's not nearly as detailed, and you submit it and get approval by April 1st, you qualify for grant money. And that's how Ingham County got their splash pad. And ice skating rinks and are given out.
Number
up-
one.
It really is a,
That's a real specific one, and it's achievable. So-
because it doesn't have to be done till April 1st of next year.
Okay.
Here's a couple of ones that are similar, but solve the septic or septic treatment financial issues, including a financing plan, move forward on dam issues, including financing for removal and begin the process. But here's a new one. Establish who has authority and control over the solid waste financing plan, BPW, townships, or county, then develop a final plan to finance.
Did you say solid waste or public works?
Pardon me?
Board of Public Works.
Yeah.
You mean Board of Public, the
Well, what you're saying-
BPW?
What he's saying is, if I read this right, you're saying, decide who's going to make the decision, and then give them the ability to kind of...
To do so
finalize
and
it.
follow through and
Is that what you're
finalize.
saying?
Right.
That's an interesting one, because, you know, one of the things we do is who does what, and we got all these boards involved, I think we have a match.
Develop and determine clear line
John?
of accountability with DPW staff.
Shouldn't mine go under
And then
fiscal
determine the vision for
responsibility,
the organizational
since I'm talking
structure.
about
Even
grant
if it
money?
doesn't, even if we can't get it accomplished, know where we're going.
I think what we were talking, there, you're talking about facilities, you're talking about parks. Typically, we've included under protect the environment
Okay.
as part of that quality of life
All right,
part in, because I mean, really all of these have some
okay.
measure of budgeting and financing attached to them. And so I think what we're trying to look at is not so much that the grant aspect of
Clear
it, but
line.
that the improvement to
All
Twin
right.
Lakes, improvement to the parks. and
Just
quality of
asking.
life.
I ask,
Yep.
I'll say something to you, and you're like, well, the townships won't let me. I say something to the townships, well, hey, it's your administrator. And
Okay.
I get this.
So here, we have two that are kind of similar, but maybe a little bit different. Mr. Stepka says, decide who has the authority. It's all organizational stuff, though. Who has the authority to complete the financing plan, you know, whether it's the Board of Public Works, the townships, or the county, and then develop and find a plan to finish it. Commissioner Friend says, determine the clear lines of accountability with the DPW and the DPW staff.
And I'm talking about the DPW staff there, because some...
Who do they work for?
Exactly.
Who do they report to? And then determine the vision of the organizational structure for boards of public works. You know, we've heard that a lot, too, and that's clearly one.
Here's a different but related, transfer resource recovery from BPW to BLC.
Okay, but all regarding organization
Right,
of the Board of Public
organizational
Works
structure.
and what authority they have. But I think we want to be careful not to lose the separate one that is the accountability of the DPW staff. But really, when the organization is decided, if we clarify that, we should have a better idea of who they're responsible to, correct?
Yeah, the only thing is between that time period,
Uh-huh.
you still...
We still have this issue that we
Yeah.
have to deal with this year, or right now. All right, so, I don't know, how do you want to do these three, John?
I think they're three separate ones.
They're
They're related but separate.
Commissioner. I kind of think they are separate, in a sense. There are organizational ones, and I think those two, I think this one and this one are organizational.
Right.
And this one, though, the developing the authority, it's kind of organizational, but it's different. It's about the financing piece. So,
I mean, in that, in case you're saying authorities, it's who's in charge, not a physical entity called the authority.
yes.
It's a different,
But this one is related to solid waste specifically?
yes.
Okay.
No.
No. Isn't it?
No, that one's related
septic.
to septic treatment. Isn't
Well-
it, Commissioner Stepka?
Establish,
That was an earlier one, actually. I had two
establish
that
who
were
has
repeat.
authority and control
Oh, that's a different one.
Yeah,
over solid waste
that's the solid.
financing plan, BPW, townships, or county, then to develop a final plan to finance.
So that's already up there, right?
Well, yes, to some extent. I mean, that's, typically, we've been doing the septic treatment facility under, now, these other ones are more organizational. I mean, you have transfer resource recovery from BPW to Board of Commissioners, and you're talking about the reorganization or the organization structure for Public Works.
I almost think they're governmental collaboration.
Well, that's what I thought, because, I mean, really, you're working with the other local units of government.
You got lots of space up there on number 4, so why don't you put them up there?
Works for me.
I mean, you can't reorganize that without
Let me do two at a
talking
time.
with the, impacting or relating to the local units.
Yeah. First one I have is, we need a new strategy and a plan to have all employees co-pay health insurance. The original plan we had was tied to Siegel, and we just let that drop, nothing's going on. And some were taken and some weren't, and we just kind of crossed that off.
More or less the same thing. Aggressively pursue savings in county-paid health insurance.
Okay.
But that'll take another round of employee negotiations, won't it?
Yep, and we're
Well,
doing
that's
them all.
true.
Oh, yeah?
Well, yeah, this, come June, July, we start all over again.
Next one I have is resolve the city-county issues regarding the Colfax report.
Okay.
I have that one, too.
All right, Beth.
Good luck with that.
I think that's about a 5-year plan, Larry.
Could be.
On how to build on current market, but not just...
Okay, so those are COPAC related.
Put them under number 4,
Yeah,
government collaboration.
where are we at? More over here?
Fleets.
Commissioner Fleets?
I think we should, on the solid waste, I think we should wait and see what the townships do on the solid waste agreement that expires at the end of this year, before we go planning anything, because like Sonny said earlier, and the indications from the townships meetings that I attend is, they're not willing, or they're really hesitant about renewing that agreement. And they certainly, I've been told in plain English, that they do not want the county telling them where their trash is going.
That's exactly what I've heard. They don't want the big centralized government.
Right, they want to do their own deal in their own township.
I believe that's been my position for a long time.
And Garfield has started Blaze the Trail already. So
Yeah, they've already done it.
I think
Okay.
that's-
That's a good one. It kind of goes along with the one that we talked about a little bit with getting rid of
The financing,
Yeah, the financing of the septic
Working
treatment.
in the shop.
Or, excuse me, solid waste.
solid waste.
Commissioner Richardson?
Collaborate with all road agencies, TC Talus and Grand Vision components on long-range countywide transportation plans.
That's a good one, too. Collaboration. Commissioner Luker?
Clarify relationship between Parks Board and County Board.
First thing I have to do is.
Okay,
That's in the works.
that's a good one.
Done this year.
It's
Clarify.
After last night.
I know, it's true, that's why I was like,
Collaboration.
Just hands in and come.
Down the document.
If I can, I sit down.
Right there, number
What
4.
do you guys think? Collaboration or government collaboration?
Relationship, clarify relationship between Parks Board and County Board.
This, I guess it could be a little bit fiscal
Well,
responsibility.
I think government collaboration.
Yeah.
all right.
We know what it means wherever it fits.
Yes.
It could also be access to services.
It could be access to services, you're right.
That's true.
Let me do one of these, you want to wait? This is Commissioner Friends. Public input on user friendliness, you spelled friend wrong. And availability of info on the website.
she didn't have spell check.
Access to, public.
Okay, we have
input-
number 6.
Yeah, definitely access to service.
He's got it, Larry.
Okay, who's next?
We would have been disappointed, Dick.
Hey, well, that's for later.
It's specific.
Okay.
That's, Google in a year
I
though.
think we should all support the Dickey plan. And that's my plan for Cass Road. You don't need to build a bridge, you just go out and go past Jack Robbins' house, down the railroad tracks to Williams Road. They gotta build just a little over a mile of road, no bridges. And I think that's what we should support as a board.
And I
Because
agree
they could-
100%
Because they
with
could
that.
save a lot of money, put it under fiscal responsibility, or
I say
environment.
Put it with the
Either one.
dams, the other cast.
Yeah, but there is
All the
talk of
dams.
revitalizing the Hammond
Except-
Hartman overpass.
Now,
I've
just, Commissioner, just so you
been
know,
pushing that for 25 years, nobody listens.
just so you know, I've been listening, and in all those meetings, we told the Army Corps, when they evaluate those alternatives under the HEPA plan, whatever it is,
HEPA.
MIPA.
HEPA.
HEPA, you know
HEPA, that's
what?
my filter at home, I can't breathe, and that's why I'm saying that. They're looking at that alternative.
Good,
Okay, so they are.
because you know, I gotta tell you, it was probably 25 years ago, Dale Williams and I were on, well, it wasn't quite that long ago, but the old Talus board. We told them to do exactly that way back then when they were looking for a place to put a bridge. And you know what we were told back then? It's not in the study area.
You'd rather spend
I
10
have reestablished meetings with the judges, reference jail population and diversions. We used to meet with the judges quarterly. We've gotten away from doing that. I think we've lost that communication back and forth. It's not such a problem right now because we don't have the population thing.
That's a good
But when we were, a year and a half ago, when we were just right up to our ears in population in our jail and we were boarding out prisoners, you know, we were meeting with them every week just to see who they could release on Friday so we could have enough population capacity in the
We used to
weekend.
do it with one commissioner.
Yeah.
So we should think about, if we decide to do this, if it's important to you, maybe a committee of 2 or 3 commissioners. would be-
Yeah, usually, there was 1 or 2 of us would meet with them, but
Tell you their strategy.
Judge Haley is
job is to
investigating a
set
new diversion program in the Veterans Court. And they've already had some meetings on it downstate. In fact, he invited Chuck Lurchant there. And
Well, our judges are pretty proactive to look at diversion possibilities, and, you know, but sometimes I think we're pretty lax about our communications back and forth, and then pretty soon we've got this big wall build up, and all of a sudden it's ugly. We need to-
Okay.
We need to improve that.
I'm going with work with city to determine how combining services might save money and/or improve service. And the reason I stuck with the city is because we have so many services that are similar at the county, rather than, I mean, you know, certainly Union Township doesn't have the same amount of service that the city of Traverse City is, so that's why I picked the city.
almost.
And this kind of goes along, doesn't it, with evaluating.
Well, they got 50 voters.
And I was thinking about raising it at that point, but yeah, it does.
Okay, so we'll put those together.
Prevent overlap of services.
Yeah.
help develop a Parks and Rec strategic plan that improves the visibility and use and expansion of the parks and improve them physically where necessary. This might go along with Bruce's a bit.
Yeah, and it actually might, your role in this might actually be funding.
Yeah.
Well, I have kind of maybe connected to that. I have a way to promote the use of Twin Lakes Park. We've spent an awful lot of money and our money, grant money, and everybody else's money to expand Twin Lakes Park, make it the only handicap accessible facility north of Grand Rapids. We need to promote that.
I think we understand what you're saying.
So I think there's two things here really, they're kind of combined. And I'm hearing two different things. I'm hearing develop the master plan and have a plan for how we're going to do this. Or maybe it's developing a plan and then a plan for promotion and marketing of our county parks. Are those two different ones or are they the same?
They're different. Well,
I think they're different.
The DNR plan is primarily a capital improvements type of plan.
Yeah.
Right.
It's where you're going after, there's not a really strategic element to that plan. It's saying, what the state's looking for is, what do you want to do, the physical improvements, and they want to know what your budget is and so forth.
That's exactly right.
Commissioner Stepke, you're kind of saying, in addition to that,
Oh,
develop
it's
a
diff-
comprehensive master plan.
No, there's a difference. No, there's a difference. I'm sorry.
Well, quick answer is basically yes, but I think Bruce's would probably come first in determining, the authority between Parks and Rec and the county.
Okay.
Once that's determined, then
We can go
move forward, yeah.
with whoever.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that a 5-year recreation plan, a master plan, and a strategic plan are 3 different types of documents. They are not the same.
But they're in the middle of a master plan right now, aren't they? Or
No, they have not begun the the master plan is generally done by the Parks Director. Ours expired in 2008, and to my knowledge,
That's what it
it's
is.
sitting there.
And you need that in order to go after that funding. The state
No,
qualifies.
no.
It's different than
The
the
the 5-year recreation plan is not nearly as detailed as the master plan. And that is specific to the Michigan, it's directed to the Michigan
Right.
DNR.
Okay.
And the due date is April 1st of every year, and for approval, which means
Right.
you really have to submit it in January. And then they hand out grant money based upon your 5-year plan.
So the county does
So-
that plan, and then above and beyond it does a master plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, and we have
interesting.
master plans
I've
on
never
each of our,
seen that
or
before.
not each of them, but we're working on master plans of all of our major parks also.
Right. That's
But
correct.
why can't the master plan that the county does qualify for the DNR requirements?
It's a very specific DNR plan that's a recreation plan, and it's looking at inventories. and
Yeah,
looking at other-
I know I've done those before, but I don't, usually communities will combine those, so you're not doing separate
No.
plans.
Actually, I wish I I have examples of both at home in my briefcase, and I wish
Yeah.
I can bring them if you want.
No, I've read the Parks and Rec master plan, but I thought that that should meet the requirements of the DNR.
No.
Would you talk to
Okay.
Jason?
All right,
You're next.
He did.
I just did.
Oh, you just did it?
Yeah, it's your turn.
So this is about the strategic plan. It talks about improving the visibility and expansion of parks, and part of that, I think, would be promoting the use of Twin Lakes
Marketing piece of it.
Camp. But that comes after the clarification between, the relationship between the Parks
Yeah,
Board
it
and
does,
the
but
county
I
board?
think it's also like, it has aspects of access to service as well. You know, if you're marketing the parks, you're
Yeah.
making the parks more available to people, or they're more aware, so I don't think it really matters where we put it, does it?
Not really, but I think this would be, if you make that argument.
Can I go back to the difference between a master plan and rec plan? John, remind me, please, I went at the Michigan Recreation and Parks Association seminar in Grand Rapids. I went and met with the person who gives out the Michigan DNR grant money. And she did specify that it is absolutely not the same thing. So
Right.
I've got her name, and I can give you her name and telephone number if you
Right.
want to, if you need further information. I just wanted to, while I was thinking of it, because otherwise I'll forget.
Okay, Commissioner Inman.
All right, give me two here. Complete the strategy to address the MERS accelerated amortization schedule.
And when you say that, what you're really saying is complete a review of the retirement plan, because we're also going to look at this possible bonding.
Right,
as
the
well.
hybrid, everything else.
It's everything. It's not-
Right. And complete the tax tribunal community strategy plan for taxing units.
That's good. That would be collaboration, I think. Fiscal responsibility, but it's also collaboration. Commissioner Fleece?
Establish a plan to replace central dispatch's radio equipment, and I think that's what somebody was talking about earlier. We presently have used equipment we bought for $1.
Yeah, and I think the plan is a good idea. I mean, the plan, because you have to do the plan as the first step to going out. So that's a good thing.
Do this,
It's a fiscal responsibility one, hold line on county personnel costs in light of decreasing revenue.
Fiscal responsibility.
I'm done.
You're done.
you just read out.
Special Police Services CPO's criteria for which they're funded and the level of funding dedicated to them.
Okay, now remember, when we say special police services now, we're talking about the old community police program that we now call special police. So, developing the policy, developing criteria on how they're funded, and the level of funding that you're gonna dedicate as a board to those things. Safe community, you ready?
Nobody said anything about cops in the school.
That's a school issue.
So,
Well, no, I think Sonny had
It's gonna
something.
become our issue because we
Yeah,
used to
Sonny
fund it
did.
100%.
yes, Sonny did put that down.
Did he?
The school liaison.
Evaluating the school liaison.
Only got one left then.
Okay, all right, you gonna use it?
Why not?
Okay, I didn't want to go a year without hearing from this.
Cat license.
Absolutely.
All right, Dickie.
It's a safety issue. Cats have,
I thought it was a revenue.
A revenue issue.
Fiscal
cat,
responsibility.
no, public health.
Okay.
Cats have diseases.
Actually, it's those damn cats
I think we've had one.
analyzing my dog.
Remember
He sits
last
there in the front door and gets all excited, and the cats just sort of...
I have look at possible,
Well, we have a coyote population on the peninsula now, they're taking care of that for us.
look at possible on-site inspection of, expansion of the health department. The health department's bulging at the seams in their current building, but, you know, we've had some preliminary meetings talking about, you know, the troubles with their clientele if they try to relocate. We obviously don't have money to go build a whole new facility. Let's look at what is available to do an on-site expansion. We still have property there.
Can I go up?
Well, remember, the long-term plan was
that'd be so
to build a
funny.
new facility. that will
Cruisers and
bring
cats
this
can
as a
fly
step
in.
down.
Okay, now you know I can't get by without putting this up here. RFP Easling Pool, thus saving up to $250,000 annually.
Ooh.
An RFP for the operations of the
Yep.
pool?
Yep.
I guess I happen to have one that's closely related, work on plan to more efficiently run the Civic Center pool, both financially and management-wise.
Now, how does this one relate? No, wait, you have one like this, don't you?
I had something close.
Okay, well, why
I
don't you-
have, regarding the Civic Center strategy, complete the heat panels to support the efficiency reduction on the boilers,
Yeah,
and implement the consultants report
for the pool
for the pool.
operation.
Yeah.
What do we got here?
So, we've got Civic Center, pool, implement the heat panels, the capital improvements.
Yeah.
But then implement the consultant's recommendations on running a lot of it. And here we have work on a plan to more efficiently run the whole the Civic Center pool financially and the management of it. And then this one is bidding out the pool,
So RFP, you mean privatizing the running of the pool? Is that-
I'm sorry, what?
You're privatizing the running of the
No,
pool?
no, and I will explain that. First of all, privatizing, if you privatize something, you sell it. In other words, if we privatize Keystone Park, the one that T-Base uses, to a private individual, they can plant corn. We have absolutely no control over it. What I'm suggesting is RFPing, contracting, putting an RFP out there so that the facility is still county-owned. We still have some say in what we want in that facility, or how we want it run, you know, it's in the RFP, so that the county still has control so that it is still a facility able to be used by Grand Traverse County residents. The other thing that I want to say about that one is, if we RFP it, I'm not suggesting that the Parks Department might not run it. They might still run it. They can submit an RFP like everybody else can. And if they're going to do the job better, for less money, serve more citizens, wonderful. You know, I'm not saying take it away from the Parks Department necessarily. I'm saying let's RFP it and see what's available out there. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do.
Well, if we could save $250,000.
It will.
Mine next?
So the work on
No, I
plan more
get supplementary.
efficiently to run the Civic Center pool, both financially and the management, that would be related to that as well, wouldn't it?
It's
Okay.
just bigger, it's the whole civic.
Right.
No, it's the Civic Center pool, you're correct. Commissioner Lee.
I think I'm all set.
Are you done?
Yep.
Commissioner Richards.
Yeah, my last one, implement countywide senior center programs through millage election.
Okay.
Oh, forgot about that one.
That's number 3, I believe.
No,
I buy that.
you still haven't got the language for the ballot on that, have you, or?
Good call.
Commissioner Friend.
The health department, somebody mentioned move, stay, or refurbish. I was just
Yeah.
walking in. But I would add to that the health department's the only one a large department, the only one without an advisory board. Like we have Parks and Rec, Commission on Aging board. And I think that potentially a board with some people in there with the background to have Fred be able to bring ideas to and kind of vet those for us may be beneficial.
So you want to evaluate the advantages of having a health board as opposed to coming right to the county board.
Yeah.
Okay?
And I have monitor and evaluate the Parks and Rec baseball program that we just voted on last night, and develop a conclusion on their change in philosophy. You know what I mean? It could be an indicator on.
So you want to monitor and evaluate, and you want to get a report at the end of the season about the effectiveness and how the program is implemented?
It's so easy right now to survey via email the parents of the program.
So develop a mechanism for measuring and the satisfaction of the program as well.
Participant feedback.
Okay? Oh, anybody else have any more?
Yeah, I got a bunch of them.
No?
Over
I
here.
got a bunch of them.
Over here.
Oh, you borrow. Oh,
Remember, we only got a year.
I know. All right,
That would be about 3 years.
all right.
That's true, too.
Strategy to improve communications, internal and external. Could consider a new position for communications director, or it could take the current position we have as communications director for the health department and expand their duties.
Thank you. You saved me writing that.
Dennis talked about what could we do as a goodwill thing for the community. Here's one item that's huge all around the United States for county commissions. They've worked with National Association of Counties and this is an extremely aggressive prescription discount card. It's free to counties. It's free to individuals that live within your counties. The counties promote it. They put their logo on, and people walk around going, "Did you see what I got from Grand Traverse County? This is really cool and saving me money." It's a great public relations tool. When I go to the conferences, this is everybody's standing up talking about this is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
What is it again?
Free prescription program that we don't pay anything for, but that we can access through NACO, that can be made available to all the citizens of the county at no cost.
I thought our Commission on Aging implemented one of those about a year ago, year and a half
The Commission
ago.
on Aging implemented one of those about 2 years ago or more.
But this is for everybody, not for agents.
This is for everybody.
So this might be something we implemented.
I
through the
just
health
remembered that we
department.
had this discussion.
Right,
about drug
Especially
credit.
with people losing their jobs and that kind of thing. and
Yeah,
not having
Okay,
health
that's a great idea.
Yeah, not knowing,
Prescription coverage, like my wife.
the second half of the meeting, we're going to talk about the budget, but I wanted to determine what kind of budget process we're going to use, the priorities, how we were going to implement those.
Okay?
We already talked about tribal relations, didn't we?
No?
Tribal relations continue the strategy of cross-depreciation and payment in lieu of taxes.
So
continue to
Let's just say finalize.
finalize the decision.
Yeah.
Work with the sheriff to finalize the decision.
And then the county board with this, and other local unit governments for the
Yeah.
payment of lieu.
Yeah.
We were this close to that part of it here, about 2 years ago, year and a half
Yeah, I
ago.
think we might get a little problem.
Yeah, we were, that's why I said we were this close a year and a half ago, and then we went.
All right.
I think I'm done. Yeah, these are all duplicates.
What do you want to do now?
So what we're going to do, I was trying to see how many
Targets.
items you had come up here. And what I'd like to do is just kind of review these, because there's a lot up here, and we've kind of consolidated some of your ideas. So why don't we start at this end, and let's see if I can kind of, maybe if we can,
Do you need help, Jim?
You know, John, in the interest of saving time, I think that if we vote and then we trust you to consolidate what appears to be consolidatable.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that, as long as you're okay with that.
Yeah, we don't.
I mean,
So if you put a dot on one and the other one right next to it has 3 dots and they're similar.
And John thinks they're the same thing and combine them?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what Weesing did.
Well, and there's a number
Made
of
a
these
judgment
that
thing.
you're not gonna do one part of it without doing the next page of it. You know,
Exactly.
they're just going to go hand in hand.
So we get, what, 20 dots?
You get
This is why we paid the big bucks.
we were thinking 5,
10.
you think
7
10?
to 10.
Everybody hang on to your dots, and
Everybody
we'll
get
be
10.
stealing them from you.
How about 8?
8?
7 to 8.
Yeah.
Is that how many dots you got left?
No, I got them all set up in very.
You know what?
I only got so many dots.
Don't touch those.
You know,
We didn't have enough dots.
another thing I forgot to mention. Talked to Joe Vandermolen from Leah, and he asked me, he said, we really want to do programs on more local government.
I like 10, but
And he
top 10
said he would
issues.
love to do something on the county.
I want more.
You have to
Departments to department.
You did?
swing
I
in your
didn't see
fellow
that.
commissioners if you want.
How much is he bribing you to get extra dots?
Didn't we do a lead
Wait, can we
program
go
where
vote?
we took them around to the counties and they talked to the various departments? You videotaped it?
Yes, there was a mic issue, so it never, when I talked to Joe last week,
We have to do it again.
he wants
But
to do
yes,
it
that's,
again.
that is.
All right.
All right, everybody, remember the rule. 1 dot on each thing. You can't put 5 dots on one thing. All right. Please.
If you pay me, I'll put 3 on the cat license.
Except Dick. Dick, you can put all 80 years on cat license. No, you can't. That means it'll be prohibited.
We'll put them on all. Sure. I think I was about the only one blue ink, so I just put one on.
So John, when you do this then, we'll kind of consolidate and then we'll show it in tiers and then we'll have to sit down with them again and say, you know, how much can we get done?
Yeah, we'll draft it
Yeah.
and put it in a good form. No meetings tonight, right?
No.
Good.
Yeah, I just did cat licensing for you.
You know, last year we were all talking that we should hand out extra sticky dots, just one extra per person, and everybody was going to stick one on the cat license for you.
But it takes 2 people really for it to.
Well, I got a lot of them left here. Anybody want to buy one?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Oh, right, yeah.
I got to tell you, you go on websites and you really find some.
I didn't either.
I like that steel
Everything I
one.
read is about how they, government is trying to find new ways to raise money. And new ways to spend it too.
True.
I don't know if you need any of this when you talk.
I'm just going to say some very
This is key. This is so fiscal nature, it's a crisis in the rating. This really makes sense.
Kind of categorized together, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you vote on one, it's pretty much in the whole group.
I'm not gonna say much.
Yes, well, we gotta make sure we read that. If not, we'll reconvene.
Might be the carpet upstairs.
Last night during the board meeting, did you guys hear that thing? It sounded like somebody was rolling a bowling ball down the hall. I still didn't find out what that was.
Carpeting, it's
Oh,
the roller.
Oh, it was the roller, okay. They were installing carpeting.
Oh.
It was the roller, I didn't think I...
How do we get 10 on this one? Somebody found it.
What? How is
Yes.
He's sitting over there looking so sad.
me?
That step could make you that mad?
I just did a double one. With a clear conscience.
I can make a suggestion.
I think I'll stand a while.
Been a lot of sitting the last few days. We've been doing a lot of sitting the last few days.
Dick, there's nothing on cat license.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's cat license up there.
I knew that would take care of that.
You know, that's probably a doable objective for added income. Make our bottom line look a lot better.
Yeah.
You know how many barn cats there are out there?
Yeah, I bet everybody would be buying a $5 license on them, right?
That's right.
You have an increase in the rat and mouse
Feral
population.
cats. What diseases they got? A lot of diseases. They just run around. If somebody takes care of their cat enough to get a license for them, you know they're gonna get shots.
I think something was in my barn the other night trying to eat cats.
These cats.
Eat them.
Let's finish them up.
You still awake, Bonnie? Yeah.
Copious no.
She's thinking, well, I could be downstairs doing a lot more productive stuff.
Yes.
Put me holding you up, I can't get this damn thing off of here. Oh, they look so wonderful, all of them.
Okay.
Last one.
Got her done.
All right, next step.
What we're going to do is I'm just going to wrap up by kind of going through these items here in terms of just making sure that I have a good understanding of what you voted for, and then we're going to
Go to the budget.
put it into a draft report, and we'll get it back to you next month. We talked about earlier about kind of assigning different commissioner to each one of those tasks, whatever they may be. We're not going to do that right now because we really don't have them prioritized in terms of actually clearly, explicitly what they're going to be. And I think once you see the draft work plan, then you'll be able to kind of go through and identify what may be of different interest.
So there's a little harmonics right there.
There you go.
Let me see. I think what we're probably going to do is somehow take these in terms of top tier ones and second tier ones based on the number of votes. I mean, we might, if there's a kind of a super majority, those would be kind of our top tier ones. Then we're going to put them down into kind of maybe a second tier and then a third tier. And I think that will at least give you a cluster of them to focus on. And then if for some reason maybe you finish one sooner, then kind of a second tier one could be bumped up into a top tier one.
Maybe what we'll do too then is when we put them in the tiers, if, for example, one of them doesn't have a resource allocated to it, we'll identify that for you and say no resources identified, so you have some idea of that. And we'll probably go ahead and put a staff assignment person with it, and then we can assign a commissioner to help, kind of oversee that, when that happens.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
I just thought of one to me that's really important.
Oh, no. I'm out of dots.
I know, it's too, and I'm thinking we're out of dots, but I really think, given the evaluation process that we went through with Dennis last year, that process has to be re-examined. I know we were supposed to bring it back to LNA, I think in like January, and we didn't, and then we changed committees, but I would really like for some commissioners to work with the new HR director and kind of reviewing what we have in place and making that a much better evaluation so that it's useful.
I would just say,
Why don't you put it on resource management
I would just,
administration for next
yeah, you should just take it on the agenda because,
Put it on the agenda.
I don't know, I don't necessarily feel that the process is flawed, and I think it has worked very well.
Sucks.
Huh? Evaluation process?
Sucks.
Try and hold yourself back.
It's fair to say there's a disagreement.
You think it works great because you like to check the little boxes and put down numbers. I think it's a lousy
All right,
system.
there's a couple ways we can do this. We can either just put it on RMA,
Yeah, put it on there.
talk about it, or when we bring this back to you, you might think of another thing that was really critical. You're going to say, you're not going to be able to do all of these. You might say, we're going to do the top 12. You may say, well, we're going to take off number 12, and I thought of this. You guys want to add this in its place? You could mess around with that later. So, okay?
It just doesn't hit me as an objective that we need to.
Right.
I mean,
That's
That's
I
strictly a
understand it's an
process.
objective, but it's something we ought to be able to work out without
Well,
listing on our strategic
I would put it
plan.
on the RMA agenda, because we won't have this done by then.
Yeah.
And that'll give you a chance to discuss it, and then we can modify it if you choose to.
Discuss with Jen, I think, and see what she has.
Already do it.
Let me just go through these quickly. We have 3 votes for monitor and evaluate the Parks and Rec baseball program. We have 4 for complete dams work plan for 2010. We have 1 for continue dam removal relocation of Cass Road, and then we have 3 down here for the Dickey's plan for Cass Road, no bridge. We have 3 for finish structuring and implementation of financing for septic facility. We have 1 for obtain grant to complete Twin Lakes through the DNR plan approval process. 1 for an RFP for operations of the pool. And 1 somewhat related to that is to plan efficiently the operations of the Civic Center and pool for financing and management of those facilities. 2 for eliminate the solid waste surcharge and the drop-offs. These are really together. The 3 is to are voting for beginning the process for a new jail. 1 is to save us from the cats, licensing them. We do have 2 votes here that are let me see here. Oh, these are separate. 1 is for established plan to replace central dispatch radio equipment and One is for special police service, CPOs, criteria in which they are funded, level of funding dedicated to them. So 2 separate ones there. We have 3 votes for the VA clinic and negotiating with the VA clinic. Or the VA.
I count 4 from here.
4, I'm sorry. 2 is the NACO discount prescription card. We have 5 regarding the health department and either possible on-site expansion of the health department in its current location. 2 is implement a countywide senior center program through a millage. Let's see here. We have a few of these 2 are related to DPW. 3 voting for the transfer of resource recovery from the Board of Public Works to the Board of Commissioners. And 1 is to develop and determine the accountability of DPW staff and determine a vision.
Those are all kind of DPW organizational issues.
Right. These 2 are for the tax tribunal community strategy with all the taxing units. So those are separate from that. We have 1 here for collaborate with all road agencies, TC Towns and Grand Vision on long-range countywide transportation plans. And then 1 is here is to clarify the relationship between the Parks Board and the County Board. We have 6 of them here. I think one of our highest vote getters so far is support and complete evaluation validity of Siegel study based on subcommittee's conclusions and develop a course of action plan. Let's see. Yeah, we got 7 of them here, and basically evaluating the effectiveness of county programs. 1 vote for public input on user friendliness and availability of the information on the website. And this is 1 to develop a strategic plan for Parks and Rec, and 1 for a communications director position, building possibly on, talk about the health department communications person. 1 is identifying new funding opportunities by looking at other municipalities' innovations. Let's see, 2 for supporting the road millage. And then this is the copay, 1 for copay on health insurance. 4 votes for aggressively pursue savings in county paid health insurance.
So really, that's 5 on that.
Really 5 there. And this is 1 for to complete strategy to address the MERS amortization schedule. And 1 is to hold the line on county personnel costs in light of decreasing revenue.
Okay.
So those are the items that you voted for, and again, we're going to condense those down into a draft report for you to look at next month.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to take a 2-minute break before we go into the budget piece of it, or do you want to just keep moving forward? I didn't know if commissioners needed a break.
It's up to them.
Okay, ready to go?
Going.
All right. We won't take real long in this, but we did want to have some discussion about the budget. And Dean and I are really kind of excited about this. I'm going to start off by, I mentioned to you last week that we went to a webinar, and it was titled Budgeting for the New Normal. Okay? And the whole theory of this is we're never going to get back to business as usual. We have to change the way we budget. We have to change the way we look at how we operate. And you see that a little bit already from us when we said we think it's important to switch our focus from expenditures to revenues. That's just kind of the start of it. But I want to tell you that we're both real excited about this webinar that we saw and the type of budgeting. And it's what Chris has talked about before and others have talked about, budgeting for outcomes. As I think Commissioner Friend kind of brought this inference out, and it's absolutely true. We don't have the expertise or knowledge, but we learned a lot the other day. We learned a lot about the fact that we have to change as government the way we provide services. And you know, since you guys have, and you did it again today, well, today you said evaluate the effectiveness of program. Last year, in our budget, we said develop performance measurements. And I'll be honest with you, I've struggled with this idea of developing performance measurements, and Commissioner McIntyre clarified it a little bit today when she said, before you go out and talk to the public about what's important, you have to tell them how much it costs, and then let them decide if it's important enough based on the cost. I'm not quite sure that I'm of the same philosophy, but I understand now that performance measurement thing, because when I was thinking of performance measurements, I'm thinking, all right, we go develop performance measurements for our departments, and it comes back and it says, we write 243 tickets per deputy per year, okay? And then in the WIC program, we say, we do 433 physical exams on women who are pregnant per year per nurse. And I'm thinking, okay, now we have measurements, and we may be able to tell how effective we're doing that, how efficient we're doing that, but how do county commissioners take this statistic on so many births and a completely different statistic on how many tickets are written and decide which of those have a higher priority? Okay? And it just, I always struggle with that. It seemed like that didn't quite get you where you needed it to go because, and I think what we're finding from this webinar that we went through is the component that's missing there is that you as commissioners have a really important and elaborate task. And Commissioner Fleece said it last night. You're running a $150 million corporation. And whether it's a new commissioner or a commissioner that's been here 18 years, for us to bring you a budget that we probably know more intricately because we work with it all the time, and ask you to draw priorities from a bunch of numbers on a page, it's just not fair to you. It's also not fair to not give you the tools you need to be able to determine what your citizens think are priorities. I'm going to tell you that the system that we watched the other day, this budgeting for outcomes, is a tool that can do that for you, and we are really excited about it. And we're going to ask you, we're getting a copy of it, we're going to ask you to spend an hour and a half with us someday and watch the presentation. We think it'll give you a real clear idea of what this is talking, how this can be useful to you, because it has a clear component of public involvement in determining for you what the public sees as your priorities. It gives you a mechanism to rate the effectiveness of your programs, the efficiency of your programs, not just your departments, but identifying the individual programs in a department. You know, they use the example of the Economic Development Department, might have 10 different programs that they work in, and then evaluate the effectiveness and the efficiency of those while weighing in and asking the public, how important is this to you? And when I went through this program with Dean and we sat and we watched it, John was there, several of our staff was there, and we invited the city to participate with us, and the city manager was there. It became pretty clear that from a county commissioner perspective, in these hard economic times where we're going to have to make difficult decisions, this kind of a process, I think, would provide you a tool, the tools you would need to pick and choose the hard decisions. You know, I know none of you were happy with the budget process last year. And frankly, when you're not happy with it, Dean and I aren't happy with it. And I think we're clearly understanding now that this has to change significantly. The way this, and without going into a great deal of detail, let me just say that the method is measuring what the public wants, defining the programs within each department, identifying measurements to see how effective they are, talking with the public, and then putting them in tiers. Let's just make it simple. 4 tiers of services. As you rank them as commissioners, as you hear from the public, you set them in 4 priority tiers. These are the most important things that we do, the next most important, the third, and the lowest priority. And then you look at where the resources are going. And from the examples that we saw, it gives you a pretty clear value of which programs, not which departments, which programs are most important to you and to your citizens. And we think that it's a tool that we should look at using. in 2004, for the commissioners that were here, the board said, we said, it's a bad economic time, we need to cut. And we went through and we cut. Some of it was across the board, some of it was programmatic, but you've heard Dean and I say, we can't read your minds about what you think is important to cut. And we're kind of in that same boat again. We're kind of to the point where we're going to have to make some significant changes. We're sensing a desire on your part to preserve the fund balance and not use the fund balance. Well, if we assume that that's true, and we will talk more about that, we know that this year's revenues, we have to cut by $1 million immediately. That's not to take into account any kind of compensation changes that take place or anything else that happens next year. So part of what we wanted to talk to you about today was the fact that we think it's time to completely change the process. And we'd like to ask your indulgence in going through this hour and a half class with us to kind of look at this method and see if it makes some sense to you that it might be a new way to do this, because clearly we can't go on doing it the way we have. Not only from a standpoint, Dean and I could balance this budget for another 5, 6, 7, 8 years. If things continue to be bad, we'd probably get by. But I'm absolutely confident we wouldn't be making you happy in terms of a feeling of comfort that we're providing the programs you want to provide. And so we think we have to kind of change the whole process. And I think it'll help make your job easier as well. Dean had a quote here from this study, and I think this is really kind of on point. This comes from this prioritization, the new reality in budgeting. It says, the true crisis government faces is hardly fiscal. It is a crisis of priorities. How strategic we are as local government professionals about understanding what we do, why we do it, and in times of scarcity as well as abundance, how we should invest our resources to achieve the results our communities need. And really, that kind of summarizes it. And I'm going to tell you, when we went through this study, when we went through this class the other day, the things that it says are the main tenets of good budgeting are the exact same things that you were telling us in the budget process. Maintaining reserves, living within your means. They were the exact same ones you've been saying. Planning long-term for financial needs. So we're here to tell you, we see the light. We see the need to look at a new method, and we think this might be the method to use. Further down the road, we want to talk to you about how we might go about accomplishing that, changing the budget philosophy and process and mindset. And then we also have to deal, I think, with the dilemma of, let's just say this, you get done, you watch this, you say, this really makes sense, Dennis, you guys are right on point. This is what we've been asking for, this is what we want to do. This is not a process that gets done in a month. This is a process that takes some time. In fact, it's highly, highly unlikely that this process, first of all, it's highly unlikely that Dean and I could do this ourselves. At least initially, we would need help. And secondly, it's highly unlikely that we can get the help we need here in time to accomplish this 4 months from now, by the time it's time to start talking about budget. Yes, you're shaking your hand wildly.
It will be nearly impossible for me to wipe the smile off my face as I hear you and Dean talk about budgeting for outcomes. I know the financial organization that Dean wins his awards from every year really has embraced this, according to their website. Budgeting for outcomes, I always say, is producing results citizens value at a price they're willing to pay. And I can give you numerous examples. For instance, let us assume that in the city of Traverse City, citizens value getting their sidewalks shoveled for them. But there's a price they're willing to pay for that service. So, will they pay $400,000 a year for that service? Probably not. Will they pay $40,000 a year for that service? Yeah. If they value that result, they will pay that. The other thing I wanted to say, and I just am so thrilled to hear you say this, Dennis. Public Strategies Group really wrote the book on budgeting for outcomes. It's a consulting firm They did offer to come to the city of Traverse City, and the COFAC meeting touched upon this last night, here downstairs when they had a COFAC reunion. Public Strategies Group offered to come to Traverse City and work with the City Commission and staff to do exactly that, design a system for budgeting for outcomes. And what Public Strategies does when they come in, they don't just come in and show you how you need to relook at things. They actually give you a tool, software, and programs that you can adapt year after year after year. So for that investment, you have years of being able to apply this. It's worked extremely well in governments around the country and around the world where it has been applied. And as a matter of fact, if you take a look at where Public Strategies Group has gone in, those communities are not having the fiscal crises that other communities are. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
I'm not to the point where, we're not to the point where we've identified any particular firm. Like what we would normally do, we would request that we do here. We would go out and get bids and would seek firms and find the best one to do it. But Commissioner Maxbauer is right. We're talking about somebody who gives you a permanent tool and in fact conducts the initial surveying and gives you a permanent tool that then we can use year after year after year with you to make this work. So that is something that I'm going to ask you to consider strongly, and we've ordered with the city, we've ordered the program, and we can do it in conjunction with a meeting or however you want it. We can just have interested commissioners participate, but I would hope that you would consider that and we would look seriously at that, because I am now convinced that, as Commissioner Maxbauer said, communities that are willing to change the paradigm on this are the communities that are going to be most successful, because the economic paradigm we're living in has changed. You know, it's a completely different game now. And I think Dean agrees with me.
I do.
We're on the same page on this.
First of all, I would suggest that we get this thing sooner than later to us, get this thing scheduled in order and whatever. And so if this takes, an extensive process perhaps through the rest of the year or whatever to go through the process, get somebody identified, go through the strategies, get the grid, list how we're going to do this. So we're probably looking at not the 2011 budget, we're looking at the 2012 budget. So what would be your suggestion to us in terms of how we would approach the 2011 budget if we're going to go through a different process for the 2012 budget?
Well, that's getting a little bit ahead of things, because first we'd have to decide whether or not this is something you want to pursue. But you and I talked about this a little bit, so I just conveyed to the Commission. My initial thoughts on this is, if this process takes 6 or 8 months to complete, or let's say to the end of the year, my initial thought was, well, we're going to go in and make the budget right, and we're going to do all this, and then we'll kind of change it next year. On the other hand, I would say it's probably some kind of a hybrid of how we would approach a budget. I would not suggest, if we're going to change the way we look at priorities, that we go in and cut $2 or $3 million out of the budget this year and then find out what our priorities are.
Right.
Yet I fully understand that commissioners are not going to be comfortable leaving everything the way it is and using $1.5 million or $2 million of fund balance. So I'm thinking we'll have to figure out a way that you're comfortable with something in between. But I wouldn't want to go in until we finish something like this, and start making cuts and then find out those were the highest priorities of the citizens, and we took them out because we thought they weren't. So I'll have to work with you. Dean and I will work with you on whatever you want to do in that regard. But that would be my caution to you. So we'd have to deal with that issue. Yes, Commissioner.
The budget procedure you've used in the past, I guess I'm familiar with, and I don't have a problem with it at all. My thoughts are, from the commission here, direction for staff is, once the budget process is done, and we say, well, we're going to have to take 10% of fund balance to accomplish what the budget is this year. Okay, we have to make a certain percentage cut across the board, county-wise, and you have your department heads say, well, in the sheriff's example, for example, if we cut $250,000 out of his budget, Sheriff Bensley, what are you going to have to eliminate? And, you know, them guys know their budgets backwards. It wouldn't take long. And then, once we've accomplished that process, perhaps, of course, the media would be listening, but the citizens, I'm sure, would respond if we were thinking wrong or guessing wrong on what the cuts should actually be.
Yeah, and that's right, Commissioner. I guess the difference is that wouldn't it be better to know what the public thinks they want to see as the cuts before you make the cuts, rather than have to go back and fix them afterwards when they're not happy with your decisions?
Not necessarily, because somebody here said it earlier today, maybe it was Chris, if they don't have any idea what something is costing them, we go out and they give us, this is their highest priority, but they don't realize it's also the highest cost. It's going to eat $1 million out of the capital expenditure. I'm sure that's going to change their mind, because we could only do that, 9 years or so.
I think this gives you I think this program kind of gives you a little bit of both. They do kind of have an idea what it costs, and then they can kind of tell you whether that's important to them or not. Commissioner, were you going to say something?
Well, I had a couple things. How are you going to ascertain the public's opinion?
One couple of mechanisms. They use focus groups, they use surveys of the community, they use public meetings. It's pretty involved and intensive.
And this program you're talking about is a computer program, or is it a form of steps you take?
It's a method, it's a process that you use, and initially what would happen, I think, is they would, and I haven't talked to anybody about it, we just watched the seminar, but I've read a little about it. They would come in and they would actually conduct the first year's work for you to set the baseline, and then they would provide you with the programs you need to keep it going year after year. But you'd have to go out periodically and assess with the public to see if these things are still appropriate or not. Actually, my familiarity with it is with some counties that started in Colorado, and most recently it's in Boulder County. They just implemented it in Boulder County in Colorado. I have some people there that I know, and I'm going to contact them they implemented it last year, and they just went through their first budget after it, so I want to do some background checking on it and kind of see about the usefulness of it and how they feel about it.
So we would be getting the same firm that worked with Boulder?
No.
Okay, there's other groups that do the same thing?
Yes, there are a number of groups. We'd want to get one that, I would say, when we looked at it, we'd want to have somebody who's familiar with county government, because there are a lot of things that are different. I'd want to have somebody who had a long track record, success, and has worked in communities that are now happy and successful with the end product. So there's a lot more research to do, but I guess initially all I'm asking is for you to, take some time to watch this with me and kind of decide if this is something worth pursuing. We believe it is, and we also believe that we just can't go on doing the same thing over and over again. Because we're not giving you the tools you need, and now I understand that. You know what I mean? When Dean and I look at the budget, we know how we can balance the budget. But we're not in your shoes. So enough on that. I'll try to set that up. Is it okay with commissioners if we try to set that up to?
Sonny had a comment, Dennis.
I'm sorry.
He had his hand up.
Well, I just had a couple things. One, as you know, I sat here in 2004, where we cut $2 million worth of budget out of the budget, and we absolutely had to eliminate personnel. You can't recycle enough paper clips to cut out $2 million. I think what we need to do, and I'm all in favor of watching this program and changing the way we do things, but I think whether we do that or whether we do anything else, one of the things we absolutely have to start as soon as we can possibly do it is an inventory of what programs we're operating.
Yeah.
In every department.
That's exactly what this
Because, I'm very familiar with, programs that the sheriff might run and probably most of what the health department runs, but I'm certainly not an expert on all the different departments and what programs they run. And somewhere, we talked about it a little bit earlier, how many people are they serving with those programs? And I wasn't being sarcastic earlier when I talked about these 0 to 3 programs. $65,000 to serve 35 families is a lot of money per family. You know, it's an important program, and when we look at just that program and kind of an emotional type presentation like we've seen, we all support that. But yet, when we actually sit back and look at the overall budget, when we start talking about cutting $1 million out, well, was that 65,000 quite as important as it should have been? You know, and there's other programs, and we've talked about different ones, but I think that whether we are able to implement this program in 2011 budget or not, we need to immediately start inventorying all of the programs that we're operating. I'm not so concerned about how many programs we're operating. What I'm concerned about is with the programs that we're operating, we're doing well. Because I'm sure that we have programs that we're doing them because we've historically done them, but we're probably not doing them well.
Well, we've historically also not spent a lot of time, there are mandated and non-mandated services. Well, we've kind of said, okay, that's mandated, this department is mandated, so, but not everything that department does is mandated. Right. And not everything that they do is mandated to the level that you're funding them. You have to look at those kinds of things. And so you're right, that is the very first thing you have to do. So we just wanted to introduce that mainly to tell you that we believe it's time for a change in the budgeting process and the way we look at this. We think it's got to have more citizen involvement. We think it's got to be more measured, and it's got to have identified all the programs and identified dollars that go with those programs, so you have the tools that you need. And we think this might be the method to look at, so we'd like to ask you to do that. Now we're just going to take a few minutes and just kind of go over some of the basics for this next year's budget to give you an idea where we're at, because some of you have asked for that. So Dean, I'm going to turn it over to you and you can start.
Well, does everyone have a copy of the fund balance analysis?
Yes.
Did you get it, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
have
it
one.
provided that, so,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I have a question right off the top on this fund balance thing. And I think I have a specific question, but I think it'll clear up some of the other things too. And my specific question is about like the TART Trail Fund, which is, sort of this little fund that we have dumped money into because they haven't spent everything that's been appropriated over the years. But I didn't notice that it appeared on here.
You are correct.
So is that just lumped into general fund?
No, it's actually in 471, the county facilities fund. We have one department, and I certainly didn't intend to, I forgot that you had made that request, but it is in the facilities fund. There's a separate department, budget cost center, for the TART Trail, and the fund balance that's reported here includes that reserve, or a component of that is for the TART Trail, and I will provide that.
Okay, but it's showing 0 at the end of 2009, is that just a mistake, or?
No, 471, the county facilities fund has a fund balance of $782,000.
Oh, there it is, okay.
I'm sorry, we always try to put things on one page, but that does make the numbers here real small. But the TART fund balance is included in the $782,000
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
figure.
That goes down each year, is that because it's being spent? I mean, of course.
We generally add a little bit to that each year based on what's budgeted, and the reason for that is to fund those bigger, larger capital expenditures when a section of boardwalk needs to be replaced. But I will provide that information.
Okay.
I'll just put that in all of your mailboxes. This is a summary of all of the funds, obviously starting with the general fund, and then it gives, some historical data in terms of where we were at the end of 2008, where we ended 2009, the fiscal year that we just completed. These numbers are not audited. There could be some changes to these amounts after the auditors come in, and there are a lot of things that should be explained here, and I really don't know where to spend the time. But for example, if you look at the county road fund, those numbers are not right. The $5 million fund balance we do not have their detailed revenue and expenditure activity on our books. And that's just based on how those revenues and expenditures closed, and we have just a control account. There very well could be bond proceeds or restricted state or federal grant money. So I just want to point out that that's a distorted number at this point. The same is true of the pavilions, Fund 291. You'll see where we went from 13 million at the end of '08 down to 3 million. That did not happen. There's a different measurement focus. That's an enterprise fund. That number in 2008 is a net asset number, and we have not done the year.
The pavilions actually had a delay in payments from the state. That might be part of that.
Well, what will happen, though, between now and the time the auditors come in, they will actually determine what those amounts are, and those will be reflected. So there are numbers on here that are very preliminary. The road commission and the pavilions are the two that I really want to just indicate at this point. These are not final numbers.
Well, the general fund can't be 950,000 for 010.
That third column is the amount that's budgeted in the 2010 budget.
You use the full general fund budget?
No, that's 950,000.
950,000.
What they budgeted in.
So the third column doesn't represent the full amount that would be budgeted?
How much we put in the budget.
Well, that's not how this
Of
reads.
the fund balance.
Of the fund balance.
I understand, but this is not what it, to me, you're telling me the fund balance in the end of December is 9.5, the fund balance at the end of December 31st is projected, was 9.1, and you're projecting that the fund balance is going to be what in
They're
010?
projecting that they're going to use
9,139 minus 950, if
I mean-
we use it all.
That's how much of that fund balance is budgeted.
Let me back up.
I understand that, but that, if you read this, it looks to me like you're projecting the budget to be this amount, so that third column, is the third column what you're going to use
The third
out of the
column is
budget?
the amount that's included in the 2010 budget of the fund balance. So for the general fund, we have budgeted to use $950,000 of a $9.1 million fund balance, a little bit over 10% of where that fund balance is actually at the end of 2009.
Okay, and that's where my mistake was in 471, so of the 782,000, you're going to use 470.
That is correct.
Okay.
And granted, in that case, we had budgeted to complete the third floor. There's always an explanation. We budgeted to complete the third floor remodeling project, but that work was not completed, so a larger amount of fund balance had to be used to complete that work. But we wanted to give you this as a starting point in terms of where we have ended the year in, the various funds that we adopt budgets for that come under your authority. And another one to point out, our Health Department Fund 222. Actually, there are some audit adjustments that we will make here because we did receive the Medicaid cost settlements. Those have been
Remember
numbers.
those ones we've been looking for years and years and years? They came in.
They finally came in, and those numbers, those revenues are not fully reflected in their fund balance. Their fund balance will
So,
actually go up.
It'll go up.
By about 600,000?
Now, some of the 600,000 is recorded here. We have some that we've recognized as deferred
But
revenue.
the point is that it's a net positive for the fund for the year, which is much better than what was budgeted.
That is correct.
For the health department.
But, I would like to leave or defer that actually to Fred and Jerry when they report that to you.
Okay.
But yes, we had a good closing in the health fund because those Medicaid cost settlement numbers did come in. But this gives you an idea of the funds, their respective fund balances at the end of 2009, and then also the budgeted use of fund balance in 2010. Perhaps it would make sense to actually have a fourth column that shows the total budget
That's what I was
for
gonna
the
suggest.
funds, just to give you some sense
Right.
for how much.
And obviously, fund balance is cash and assets. For instance, the Fund 619, that 11.425 million reflects a lot of taxes that have not yet been collected, right?
That is correct. That is the, when you're looking at the balance sheet for the delinquent tax fund, and that is the main fund, it has all of those tax receivables.
If it were all cash, we wouldn't be going out for bonds.
That is correct.
Okay.
It's not all liquid, or it's not all cash. But we will do that. I think I'll update this to include the 2010 expenditure budget, so you have another reference point. And, you know, as you study this, if you choose to do that, if you have any questions, please email or ask. It's a lot of information to...
Dean, I have a question right now, and I don't know how difficult this is for you. Is there a way on this sheet that we can see how much is coming out of the general fund to fund the department? For instance, Commission on Aging is pretty much millage. You know, so if we had a column for
General fund appropriation.
general fund appropriation.
We have plenty of space here on this to add a few more columns, so yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking then you're going to have to put total budget
You're
in
gonna
there
have-
so commissioners can see where the,
Right.
where the other money.
And you're going to have to list all the departments.
Yeah, we can work something
Well-
out, absolutely.
No, let's just try to go with, obviously, the total budget for these different funds, and then the general fund appropriation, and the correct term is transfer out.
Okay.
But that's easy enough to
Yeah.
do.
Thank you.
You want to move on and talk about the revenues?
Yes. The next sheet, and this is really a very rough draft, I think one of the items, not at my request, I don't know why this ended up on the agenda. for
Commissioner
today.
requested it to talk about it.
Oh, they have every right to request that.
Thank you.
Something.
In line with our different focus, to concentrate on revenues, and I think it's important that we do this too, because we probably
Thank you.
should be communicating this with the departments as well. But what I've done here, from 2004 forward through 2009, are the actual, and this is just the general fund. So this is Fund 101. It's only one of the funds that's on the fund balance summary, but it lists the actual revenues by the various sources. And 04 through 2009 are actual, with the caveat that 2009 is, you know, still subject to audit. And the one sheet here that printed out, we made some changes to this today, and I can see that it's not correct, because it does show the fund balance forward. It shows the budgeted fund balance, but that's not actually a use. It's a budget item, but it's not a revenue that's realized. So the 2009 numbers are off.
You corrected them upstairs?
No, I don't think so.
We'll get you a corrected one.
So basically, it's this number less that 497,000?
Well, and then I'm looking at this, and I'm not sure that the numbers are right. They're probably not final, and I apologize for that. But, yeah, these numbers. Well, yeah, the 2009 information is not correct. They're not final numbers.
All the numbers, or just the?
Just the 2009. They're close, but they're not correct. We printed off the wrong spreadsheet. The 2010 numbers, though, are based on the budget that the board adopted. And then this isn't run, a great, it's not far in the future, but I did want to try to do a rough projection of where revenues are headed. And the first thing I would say is we know now that the tax revenue that we budgeted for 2010 is probably overstated. We're still, we're just in the process of getting the tax rolls, the taxable value from a couple of the smaller townships have reported. We don't have the city or Garfield Township at this point. So knowing that we're overstated in tax revenue in 2010, I took the numbers down for 2011 and 2012, and I'm basically budgeting a 1.5% increase for tax revenue.
I think Lori told me Mayfield is in and it's a 3% reduction, and East Bay is in and it's a 1% reduction.
Or was that Acme? I think it was Acme.
I thought it was East Bay. We'll have a look at it. But in any event, middle size, but of course, that could all turn around depending on the city and Garfield. But I talked with Chuck Corn yesterday, and Chuck didn't have final numbers, but it looked like it might be going down a little bit too, so, you know.
And we're not sure if those are just the result of, well, I shouldn't say just, but Board of Review adjustments or what other activities might be affecting revenue, because the estimated new construction from Construction Code for 2009 was $66 million. But with that being said, we, at this point in time, we do not know what, you know, the tax levy will be, because we do not know what taxable value
But
will be.
to give you another idea, you know this, of the uncertainty of it, I talked to Lori this morning, we had our staff meeting, and she's added it up. Right now, there's $62 million in the tax tribunal awaiting a decision.
Wow.
So what I did here with, basically, and even though this isn't the right spreadsheet, I revised the 2010 number for purposes of calculating 2011 and 2012. And those numbers, at least for the tax revenues, are based on the revised 2010 number, which basically shows flat tax growth. And I grew that number by 1.5%, just to see how the revenues would trend forward the next 2 fiscal years. And then the other revenue categories are increased based on the percentages that you see on the bottom. This is not an exact science by any means. I'm sure any one of you could look at these trends over time for the revenue sources and point out things that you see that might be different. Like I said, this was really it's a work in process. It is something that we need to refine. And, you know, it's just for the purpose of trying to show what the revenues appear to be doing based on historical and known information at this time.
So the bottom line is, revenues are going down. You can see in 2011 and 12, there is no fund balance in there to change those numbers. And that could potentially have an impact on it if you decided to use it. But in any event, what this is just a mechanism to point out the fact that we're going to have to make some big changes. I've already started department head meetings in January and told them they should be looking for major changes here in the next 18 months. Yes.
So were we to use this $950,000, what would our fund balance be as percentage of the budget then?
It would be, well, we're at 9.1 million at the end of 2009. We were targeting a 20%.
Okay.
It would be somewhere above, just a little bit above 8.1 million. 8,150,000, but
So it would be a little over 20%.
just a little over.
And last night we said we were targeting 18%?
18 to 20.
Or 18 to 20?
18 to 20.
At 20%, you have $1.5 million over. Do you know, if you have $1.5 million more in fund balance at the
But
level at the end of
then-
'09?
Would that be based on the 2008 fund balance or 2009?
2009, end of the year 2009. But then that 950,000 would come out of that if it were used.
Correct.
Yeah. And so at 18%, you know, you're looking at more like 7 million.
Something like that.
So there's a little bit of flexibility in there, but not a great deal.
Which is basically if you're going to maintain that target level of fund balance, the ability to use large amounts of fund balance going forward is not really an option.
you do have, I mean, there's, between the 18 and 20, I think it's like
There could be
742,000.
some,
Yeah.
but it's not anything in the $950,000 range.
We should start.
Yes, did you have a question?
No, I think Dean already said it, just basically that spending $900,000 or $950,000 of fund balance every year is obviously not sustainable.
No, absolutely not.
Which means that unless we control the growth in the budget, we're going to be in big trouble.
Because you don't see any significant increase in revenues.
Not in the short term.
No,
Yeah.
no, you know, at some point in time, you want to be somewhat optimistic, but we're always hopeful that interest rates turn around or increase, but, you know, we have not seen that. There's also, interest revenues are a function of your cash balances, and with, you know, the shift to the summer tax levy, having to borrow, you know, to buy delinquent taxes, your available cash for investment purposes, you know, is going to decrease over time too. So even if interest rates do increase or improve, there have been years where, you know, just the swing in interest rates could make up some significant differences in our revenues, but that's not something that we hold out a lot of hope for at this point.
So in addition to revenue reductions or stagnant revenues, a couple of other things we know that are coming down the pike. You're going to be faced with I think, some difficult decisions in how you fund Michigan State Extension Service programs. You heard Mark say last night that the status is the same as the schools of the university system. What the impact on that will be is unknown at this point in time. But as I told you, we know that there won't have department directors, for example. The way this has worked is basically the county's put in money to provide support services for the professionals that are hired by Michigan State. One of the questions I have is if the state cuts half of the professionals out, will the county board decide to provide clerical support for the half the professionals are left? I can tell you, you're going to be asked by MSU and the public to say, well, take that other half and provide more programming. That's going to be one issue you're going to be faced with in this next budget for sure, along with the revenue issue. And then developing negotiation strategies is clearly going to have an impact on how next year's budget looks. And we have to start on that in June at the latest, probably before June, because we're going to start negotiating in July, and that's obviously going to impact. So I think we got to also change the way we look at the negotiation strategy with you. I think we want to get that way up front with you and have you adopt a strategy early on. Another reason I'm hoping that we can get the Siegel review done, so we at least have some sense of the validity of that thing before we move further, just so that we have that component in your mind for whatever you decide to do.
We do have an initial meeting scheduled, just so you know.
So it's going to be really challenging. I will take your advice, Commissioner Stepka, and I will. I'm going to try to get that set up as soon as we can to view that webinar, because I think it's important. Because if you agree with us and you decide that this is a good direction to take, then immediately we have to start talking about what our interim direction you want to give us for the 2011 budget, so that we can plan when we're sitting there doing 2012 in about 18 months budget. We have all the tools in place, you know, I mean, to kind of move on from there. So, a lot of tough decisions. Are there any other questions that you want to talk about with us about budget? That's really all we had. We wanted to give you some information and just answer your questions.
Yes. When can you present this program?
Well, we've ordered the video, and as soon as we get it, we'll be presenting it to you. Dean and I will be doing some background work in between then, talking to other counties that have gone through it, things like that. And then we'll be putting together a list of vendors that provide this, so we can start checking that kind of stuff.
Well, and I think we need to be moving forward, if we can, with the inventory of the programs that we have and what they cost.
Yeah, the only thing I want to do, Commissioner, is I want to make sure that that's prepared in a way that meets the method.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't want to go through all that work and then find out, no, you need to do it a different way. So we'll do that. But I really would hope in the next couple of weeks to try to get a meeting scheduled with you so we can watch this for those of you that are interested.
Obviously, whether we call it a program or whatever, it's still, in many ways, kind of another study, even though, so I need to, I question, what the cost of it is.
Well, of course you will, and that's okay, and you should, that's your job. Let me say this, and I know you're very sensitive to studies, and again, I appreciate that, and you should be. But I have to tell you that I guess I don't necessarily disagree that, or I don't necessarily agree that, just the idea that it's a study makes it bad. I have, this is a $150 million corporation. And sometimes, you, especially in government, you don't have, I don't mean to say you have it in business, but we don't have people sitting around that are experts in every area. Sometimes it's more cost-effective. I've heard commissioners tell me, contract that. It's cheaper. Well, certainly contracting to get the information you need to make decisions on a $150 million study is cheaper to do than hiring staff to do that. And so sometimes I just think, not all the time, but sometimes I think it's valuable, and it's the right decision to make. So I hope you just keep that in mind, because, this particularly is going to impact this $150 million budget for years and years and years, so the financial impact is significant. So let's hold on that until we find out how much it is. And
That's, and that's just the obvious question. I didn't know if you had any preliminary number or...
No idea, none at all.
350,000.
Honestly.
Though,
like a
this
single
is,
study.
if you look at
The
this,
city
this
of
is
Traverse
the
City?
most important thing
50,000.
collectively to
That's all?
commissioners.
That's a deal.
That's up here. And it was to residents too,
Yeah.
basically. I mean, whatever it ends up being, and obviously we have to make sure it's a responsible amount, but it's an investment in how we planned for this community.
With a proven track record of success.
Yeah, let's just hold on until you make your own decisions on it. I want you to see it, and I really want your input in it. Commissioner Thomas, we're done. That's all we had, unless you have anything else.
Wow.
Well, I'm sure they want
3
to stick
o'clock.
around for a while.
Oh, yeah, plenty of talking time.
I think Jeff's
If
saying
anybody
open at
wants to take some
3:30,
pizza with
so
you,
I
that's,
guess we're just about on
we're just
time.
going to sit there. Commissioner, you might want to ask for public comment, just to be official.
Well, I looked out that way and they were lining up. There is no public comment because there's no public. How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Another disappointing year for cat licenses.
I would have been disappointed if you hadn't said that.